Tacos. I glanced over at Delaney. Tacos? She nodded gravely. It's Tuesday. Taco Tuesday. Shh. I looked down at the dollar bill-filled pouch on the console, our makeshift swear jar in the truck. The only taco place near here is Taco Grande. She straightened up. Casa del Taco Grande. Best tacos in Virginia. 3 cheese tacos, chipotle power tacos, cilantro lime tacos, beefy bean tacos, cheesy bean tacos. We should get the big taco sampler and try them all. 12 amazing tacos. I winced at her cheerful quoting of their tagline. Ramon makes better tacos at his food truck. Plus, that place is always full of stoners. I heard you can order a dime bag of weed right at the counter. I know. It's called the Happy Happy Taco Special. She grinned. Ramon is on the other side of the county, and you owe $1. For what? You said, damn. That's not a swear word. Ha! Damn it. $3. She lit up gleefully. I'll put in $1. Damn doesn't count. Cherie had made that call, saying we needed to save enough money for food and gas. She had no idea what Delaney was planning to use the money for, but agreed to referee for us. Cherie's birthday was 6 months away. At the rate we were filling the swear jar, I thought Delaney might buy her a new car. From the smirk on Delaney's face, I could see she'd gotten exactly what she wanted. She punctuated her victory with an irritating buzz from the circuit tester she was playing with. You're gonna run the batteries down. She snickered and gave another short buzz before stuffing it in her pocket. The swear jar was her idea, and I thought she'd lost her mind, but every time she cussed, she dutifully put in a quarter. She insisted my rate was $1 since I was an adult. I couldn't complain too much. Hell, it was kind of my fault anyway. I had talked to a friend named Kurt who ran a security services and training company in Texas, planning to arrange a crash-bang driving course for Delaney in a few years, as I had promised her. Instead, Kurt jumped on it immediately. Our old teammate Tony, who occasionally worked for Kurt, was getting married, and had convinced Kurt and his wife Katie to watch over his new stepdaughter while he and his bride went on their honeymoon. Delaney got to go to Texas for 3 weeks for what amounted to an abbreviated bodyguard training course. It was mostly driving, with some shooting and first aid, alongside a couple of other girls her age. Kurt based it on the training they provided to teenage family members in high-risk situations. Cherie and I took advantage of the situation ourselves. It wasn't exactly a honeymoon, but I took her to Jamaica for a couple of weeks. We got a little sunburned in some interesting places. When Delaney got off the plane in a black t-shirt with a cartoon drawing of a flipped-over burning car with 3 stick-figure girls dancing around it, and the logo, Camp Mayhem, drive it like you stole it. She was practically skipping. She'd fit in perfectly. All the time we had spent working on cars and driving them around the lot, and the old quarry had really paid off. Probably for the first time in her life, she was the cool kid who knew all the answers. When they introduced the girls to the cars and told them to look them over, Delaney promptly checked the tires, popped the hoods, and climbed up to check fluid levels. She almost broke the evasion course record set by a professional driver. She also helped me when I worked at the free clinic on Thursday evenings, so most of the first aid training was pretty easy for her too. Most importantly, she made real friends. Delaney called her Camp Mayhem classmates, Mackenzie and Tess, on a video call every Thursday to talk about whatever teenage girls talk about. They emailed back and forth, mostly pictures of cars, cats, and guns. She even brought home a picture of the 3 of them sitting on the crumpled wreck of a car and hung it up in her room. She'd also brought home the idea of a swear jar. Apparently, Kurt and Katie thought professional bodyguards and drivers should watch their language, so it was a tradition at the school. I was pretty impressed that she'd only had to pay in $30, until she admitted that it was just a quarter each time. That sounded a lot more like her. When Delaney had put the swear jar in the truck, she'd explained she wanted to use it to get Cherie something for her birthday, so I wasn't entirely against it. It did seem to drain cash from my wallet regularly. I finally gave in. We both knew I would, since going to Ramon's would take another 45 minutes. I pulled the rollback into the parking lot and got out, while Delaney jumped down and bounced alongside me to the front door. The cashier, a pimply guy with long, fried, bleached-out hair sticking out in all directions from under his cap, stared at us dazedly for a long moment, trying to figure out why on earth anyone would come into a restaurant. Then he shook his head and started. Welcome to, I sighed. Taco Grande? It's welcome to Taco Grande, and you are going to take our order. Heh, yeah, that. Dude. I rubbed the bridge of my nose. It's just a little early to be this baked, isn't it? Yeah, ... He grinned, then stopped as he tried dazedly to remember what we were talking about. Look, we'll take... I glanced down at Delaney, who looked back at me hopefully. A big taco sampler and 2 large Cokes. He punched at the register for a while, apparently randomly. I could see 2 guys in the back snickering, obviously just as stoned as he was. 2, big sombrero combos, right? Jesus, look. I was cut off by the loud buzz of the circuit tester in Delaney's pocket. I shot her a sharp look. She glanced up at me with mock alarm. Your ankle monitor is going off. She peered anxiously at the parking lot, then turned to the stoner cashier. We should really get this to go. He stared at us both in shock for a moment, then spun around and started grabbing handfuls of tacos off the warmer shelf, stuffing them into a bag. He shoved the bag at us with 2 large cups. That'll be, $5? Offered Delaney helpfully. Yeah, $5. Delaney giggled all the way back to the rollback. I watched her pull herself up into the cab. Did you enjoy that? She rolled her eyes. We'd have been there all day. Besides, ... She peeked into the bag. He must have put 30 fucking tacos in here. You owe a quarter, Buttercup. Damn it. Just as we were pulling out, the sheriff's black and gold Tahoe pulled in. Delaney frantically rolled her window down and waved wildly. Get the big taco sampler, it's awesome! She fell back into the cab, gasping for breath between fits of laughter. Look at the back. I glanced back and saw 3 red, green, and white-clad figures sprinting frantically from the back of the store, the last one's blonde mop bobbing comically. We'd been back at the yard for almost an hour when the sheriff pulled in. He eyed me laconically for a moment, then shook his head at a near-comatose Delaney lying across the top of the right-side tool case on the rollback, a stack of taco wrappers on her chest. He got out and walked over, glancing at her as she groaned. What's with her? Taco-induced paralysis. Is that fatal? Not usually. The antidote seems to be a candy bar. Delaney opened one eye, hoping I might produce an actual candy bar. Huh? He leaned on the truck. You 2 see anything weird at Taco Grande today? Like what? Like something that might cause me to find an abandoned, flooded restaurant? Flooded? I didn't see anything like that. Water was pouring out of the men's bathroom. Seems somebody tried to flush a kilo of weed down the toilet. Delaney tried to stifle a giggle, but it escaped. The sheriff gave her a completely ineffective glare. It didn't help that she knew he had a soft spot for her. I shrugged. News to us. You'd think a taco joint would have a sturdier toilet than that, with all those beans and everything. It'd probably have helped if they'd taken it out of the plastic bags. Delaney giggled again and rolled onto her side, then squawked her circuit tester. I sighed. The idiot with the blonde hair at the counter may have been under the mistaken impression that I had an ankle monitor on, and that local law enforcement might be looking for me. That's an oddly specific mistaken impression. The sheriff chuckled. It is, isn't it? Delaney pulled herself to a seated position with a tiny belch. I wasn't trying to get them in trouble. The sheriff tipped his hat back a bit. They aren't. I could roll up Mookie anytime I wanted. It's just not worth the trouble. Mookie? Delaney brightened. Mookie? Burton Murkowski Jr., a.k.a. Mookie. He has a little trailer grow house off Route 19 in a clearing by Copper Creek. Small-time pot grower who likes to think of himself as the Robin Hood of weed. He doesn't cause any trouble, doesn't lace his stuff with anything, and doesn't sell to kids, so I just leave him alone. I understood, but Delaney looked puzzled. But if you know what he's doing and where he's growing stuff, I have more important things to spend resources on than a guy like Mookie. I get elected here to keep a peaceful community. If the state or the feds want to chase after him, that's their problem. He's pretty much harmless. Probably even does some good. Delaney looked doubtful. She knew my history with drugs and knew I stayed well away from them. The sheriff caught the look. You know Friendship Village? She nodded. The old folks' home. They prefer retirement community. There are a number of cancer patients out there, a lot of chronic pain. Some people swear by marijuana for that kind of stuff. Rumor has it that Mookie really believes in the healing power of weed and goes out there a lot, only takes token payments. I blinked. Maybe he wasn't a total loser. Really? Yeah, let's just say if Mrs. Ramirez offers you a brownie, think twice before taking it. Good to know. So you're not arresting Mookie? Delaney raised one eyebrow comically. Nah, he's harmless. He'll probably hide out in his grow trailer for a couple of days, waiting for the DEA to bust his door down, then go back to work. His uncle owns Casa del Taco Grande, so he has a hard time getting fired. We were still laughing when a stream of black SUVs with police lights poured into the yard. Half a dozen state police officers swarmed the area, guns drawn, with a couple of plainclothes agents directing them. I held my hands up cautiously. I was pretty sure I hadn't done anything lately that warranted a shootout. Delaney followed my lead, giving me a cautious, sidelong glance, which earned a nod from me. One of the plainclothes guys walked straight to me, barely giving a glance at the sheriff. He looked like a stiff-necked prick. Lester Dawes? That's me. You're wanted for questioning in the attempted murder of Mrs. Charlotte Morris. I fucking wish. I grimaced and squeezed my eyes shut for a second. Shit, you said attempted, didn't you? God damn it. Two of the uniforms opened the trailer, and I looked at the sheriff. You see a search warrant? Not yet. He glared at the guy who'd addressed me. Mind telling me what you're doing here, and maybe showing a little fucking professional courtesy? Special Agent Stein, Virginia State Police. I have a stop and hold for Lester Dawes. His ex-wife was shot 4 times in her home last night, and we have reason to believe he was present. I raised an eyebrow at the sheriff. He knew damn well where I'd been. Just like every Thursday night, I'd been at the free clinic with a dozen witnesses, including 2 of his deputies who'd brought in a vagrant for treatment. I shook my head, really wanting to see what Charlotte was accusing me of this time. Maybe I could get her tossed in jail for a change. The sheriff went along with me. Well, Special Agent Stein, how about we walk over there for a bit and have a discussion? Or do you want me to call every deputy in the county over here right now and maybe get on CNN? Stein scowled irritably, then looked over at one of his men. Give me a second, cuff them. Delaney's eyes narrowed, and she tensed as one of the police stepped towards her. The sheriff glanced between her and me. Wait a fucking minute. Do you have a stop and hold on her too? No, but... Jesus Christ, she's 14. You don't have a stop and hold for her, she doesn't appear to have done anything, and you're just going to roll her up? Fucking idiot. She stays with me, and I'll have Cherie come get her. For a moment, Stein looked like he was going to do it anyway, and I braced myself, gauging the distance to Delaney as she tensed up. I wasn't sure what she was going to do, but I had a feeling everybody on the lot was about to get caught up in a real shitstorm. The sheriff pushed between Delaney and the approaching officer, holding up his hand, Mike. I mean it. This is about to end up all over the funny papers. He takes one more step, and I'm putting out an emergency all call, turning this into a 3-ring circus. Stein glared at him. You should be helping me out here, not putting your job in jeopardy. My job? I'm doing my fucking job. I don't work for the state. I work for the people of this county, and they'd take a damn dim view of me letting some asshole cart off a minor with no cause. The agent must have finally decided the sheriff was serious because he waved his officer back. From the seething hate in Delaney's eyes, I figured he'd just gotten lucky. We probably all had. I found myself secured in an interview room for the next few hours. Only the occasional deputy sticking their head in to check if I needed anything broke the monotony. At least it was monotony until the sheriff walked grimly into the room, letting the door swing shut behind him. "We've got a problem." Before he could continue, Agent Stein slammed the door open and stomped towards me and the sheriff. "Where the hell is the little bitch?" His voice was odd, probably because of the bloody paper towels he was holding up to his nose. "Where's who?" "You know who it is, Delaney Morris." "No idea who that would be." "The girl we picked up this morning with you. You know damn well who I'm talking about." "You mean my daughter, Delaney Dawes?" He paused, gauging me for a second. "Okay, Delaney Dawes. Not a fucking clue. Last time I saw her, some asshole State Criminal Investigation Division agent shithead, that'd be you, was hassling her, and the sheriff here said he was going to call Cherie to come get her. I've been sitting here chained to a fucking table ever since." I looked at him. "I'm guessing, from that fucking broken nose, you talked to her again." The sheriff put his hand on my shoulder. While I was trying to call Cherie, the agent here apparently thought he'd go and ask her some questions. Without me or Cherie there? Isn't that fucking illegal? "I was going to ask her who to call if we couldn't reach this Cherie person," Agent Stein said woodenly, just in case they were recording this. He knew nobody in the room remotely believed that line of shit. "Cherie. And let me guess, you're gonna claim she just attacked you for no reason?" He fell silent, and the sheriff stared at him. The recorder wasn't on in that interview room. Deputy Hyatt let him in to see her under the impression he needed to get contact information from her, but insisted on the interview room door being open since Delaney is a minor, which is why Deputy Hyatt still has a job. At some point during the questioning, something went wrong, and the agent here ended up with a broken nose and missing car keys. I laughed out loud. Let me guess, the agent's car is now missing. The sheriff suppressed a grin. "We pulled the tracker data, and it led to the salvage yard, but we couldn't find it. The tracker data says it never left the yard." The agent glared at me. "The little bitch must have turned off the tracker somehow." "We'll find her. We have a statewide APB out." I shook my head slowly. "You really pissed her off, dickhead. She was having a great day, and you just had to go and fuck it all up. She's got a real bad temper. I wouldn't bother with the APB on your fucking car. That car is state property." His attempt to sound important was kind of ruined by the broken nose nasal tone. I glanced over at the sheriff. "Did the salvage yard smell like gasoline when you went back to look for his car?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, real strong now that you mention it. I thought she might have spilled some putting gas in the car or something. She'd have been in a hurry. No time to drain the fluids or strip it like we're supposed to. We'll probably be fined for that." Agent Stein looked lost, but I could see the sheriff catch on. He started to turn red, trying not to laugh. He closed his eyes. "Fuck," I chuckled and looked over at the agent. "Hope you didn't leave anything important in your car, Cupcake." Stein was starting to look pissed. "What the fuck are you talking about?" "Try looking in the car crusher, asshole." His eyes shot open. "That little bitch." I leaned towards him as far as the cuffs would let me. "Call her that one more time, asshole. Call my daughter a bitch again. Do it. One more fucking time." He started to say something and thought better of it, pulling back and walking out. The sheriff looked at me. "They've gotten a judge to sign off on transferring you, claiming the attack on your wife has some kind of jurisdictional precedence. They also say they found cocaine in your office trailer." "The office trailer?" First fucking good news I've had all day. "Tell Cherie to get in touch with Tara and check the inside security cameras." He kept an eye on the door. "I don't like this." "Me either," I thought for a second. "I thought this was Charlotte playing games, but now I'm not sure. Can you have your deputies search me and take all my clothes, issue me a set?" "Good idea. That way they can't arrange to find something on you later. I nodded. Delaney will probably head for Cherie, but she's not a fucking idiot. If she sees a cop or anyone she doesn't know, she'll be a ghost. It took 4 hours for them to complete the transfer to the larger jail, and as soon as I arrived, I was processed in by a couple of correctional officers who did their job professionally and thoroughly. I was glad I wasn't carrying anything. The bigger CO stared at my arm. Somalia, Nigeria, Uganda, Kenya. Shit. What's wrong? The brown-haired CO looked from me to him. His tattoo, De Oppresso Liber, with deployment bars under it. He eyed me warily. 5th group. Yeah, medic. 13 years with group, 17 years under SOCOM. I did 5 years in Ranger Regiment. You're not going to make any trouble, are you? I won't go looking for it. He understood immediately. Shit. The other CO still looked confused. What? He's a medic, right? In special operations, that just means he knows how to sew you together after he fucks you up. He sighed. I'll get the word to the would-be hard cases to stay backed off if you promise not to start any shit yourself. I'll keep to myself. I just want to be left alone. I'd arrived just in time for lunch. I sat alone, eating a very forgettable beef stew, just warm enough to not fully congeal, accompanied by a slice of bread. The orange safety spork probably tasted better. A couple of prisoners at a table not too far from mine slowly got up and headed my way. From the North County Wild Boys' tattoos on their necks, I figured at least it wouldn't be a boring discussion. The big NCWB gang member sat down across from me. The smaller one sat next to him. They both kept their hands open on the table. I just stared at them. The smaller guy squared up. We ain't involved. Involved in what? Words out you're worth 10 grand dead. Sounds kinda low, almost insulting. Yeah, that's what we thought. We're out. We wanted to make goddamn sure you know that. We told the others to stay out of it too. You kill more fucking people than Glock. 10 grand ain't near enough. Good to know. He started like he was going to get up, then paused. We was supposed to be at the welding shop that day, but we got rolled up 3 days before. Lucky you. Yeah, we're taking it as a sign. We're out of that business, all of it. Then I'm probably not interested in you. He looked down at the table. If anybody tries for the 10, they're freelancers. Everybody got the word to stay away, but some people are just stupid. He started to get up, and I held my hand up. You wouldn't know who Manny was planning on selling the girl to, would you? He shook his head. Manny didn't tell nobody shit. All I know is he was planning on taking her to Richmond. You find out, you let me know. It'd go a long fucking way to making sure I forget about you. They walked back towards their table. It was Sunday night before anyone decided to take a shot at the 10 grand. I was eating alone again when the smaller NCWB gang member caught my eye from across the room and glanced meaningfully at a couple of skinny meth heads at another table. I gave a single nod. After dropping off my tray, I casually strolled toward the corridor outside the jail laundry. It was the only place I'd seen without cameras, dimly lit. Leaning against the wall, I waited until they hurried around the corner after me. I swiftly subdued the larger guy before they realized their mistake. Gripping the smaller one, I slammed him against the wall, the impact ringing through the hallway. A crudely sharpened toothbrush handle clattered to the floor. I pushed him up against the wall. Some people lack survival instincts, no sense of self-preservation. Blame it on the streetlights. All that brightness out there. Some folks forget why they should fear the dark. He started to speak, panic in his eyes, but I drove my fist into his gut, leaving him gasping for air on the floor. People with sense would wonder, why does everyone steer clear of that guy? There's gotta be a reason. But you two? No survival instinct. You just don't get it. I glanced down the hallway. The silver lining is, I think I can help you understand. They say one truly traumatic experience can make you rethink your whole life. As he cringed, I shook my head sadly and grabbed his collar. This is for your own good, really? Monday morning was anticlimactic. Tara had swiftly orchestrated a meeting with the State Attorney General's office and the Chief of Internal Affairs, armed with compelling video evidence. Agent Stein had been aware of the external cameras, but hadn't anticipated the existence of concealed internal cameras in the trailer, feeding footage to cloud storage accessible to Tara without breaching the salvage yard's perimeter. I had installed those cameras when we moved to the cabin, primarily to deter local thieves, a decision driven more by a sale than foresight. They proved invaluable in capturing Stein red-handed while planting drugs. My court appearance was brief, as the state hastily dropped charges and extended an apology. Tara remained at Internal Affairs, ensuring proper handling and transfer of video evidence for Stein's impending prosecution. On a positive note, I had transportation arranged, a taxi to return me to the sheriff's department. Upon arrival, the sheriff was waiting. I nodded gratefully. "Thanks for getting the word to Tara and Cherie. Let's wrap this up. I need to find Delaney." "Yeah, about that." The sheriff pushed open a door marked "Patrol Officers Only." Delaney sprang up from a lounge chair. Finally. Glancing around, I noticed my old sleeping bag laid out on a cot in one corner, alongside Delaney's familiar blanket and pillows from home. "How long have you been here?" She grinned mischievously. "Since about an hour after I broke that asshole's nose. He kept insisting you weren't my real dad." The sheriff sighed. "She slipped in through the vehicle bay door and hid here. We found her after your transfer. I didn't trust that agent, so we let them search statewide. I couldn't even get in to see you to let you know. Since those blankets are from home, I guess Cherie knows too?" "Cherie was already here with Delaney when we found her," the sheriff informed me. Delaney smirked and gestured towards the wall phone. "I called her and filled her in on everything." Cherie strolled into the lounge, looking pleased with herself. "Ready to get out of here? The truck's outside, and I don't want to risk getting a ticket." I shook my head, amused, and she leaned in for a quick kiss. The sheriff nodded at Delaney. "It's time to get you out of here, and don't forget those poker cards. Deputy Hyatt owes you 23 candy bars by now." "She'd better pay up," Delaney replied with a mischievous grin. "No cheating." "I'm sure she won't," the sheriff assured her before turning to me. "I'll be right back. I need you to sign for your personal effects." Once he left, Cherie looked at me with a knowing smile. "Do you think this is all about Delaney?" "I suspect so." I began, but the sheriff returned, handing me a stack of forms and a pen. He passed my belongings to Cherie. I sat down and started filling out the forms. Delaney gathered her things and eagerly took a seat across from me. "So, how was it? Did you get any cool prison tattoos? Maybe shank someone for a pack of smokes?" "I was only in there for 3 days, and you know I don't smoke, Delaney," I replied, glancing up at Sherry standing beside me. "Is it possible I've had too much caffeine? This can't be normal, right?" Delaney, barely containing her excitement, ignored my question and Sherry's soft chuckle. "Come on, something interesting must have happened." The sheriff shook his head incredulously. "You two are something else." He sighed heavily. "It's not my jail, so it's not my problem. If they had kept you here, I would have put you in solitary myself. Can't say I blame whoever did it. The COs told me those 2 prisoners were beaten so badly, they couldn't even come up with a decent lie about how it happened. Claimed they tripped and fell down stairs that don't exist." "Interesting choice of excuse," Cherie remarked, arching an eyebrow at me. The sheriff nodded. "Exactly. No stairs in sight, and those guys couldn't have crawled a foot, let alone navigated imaginary stairs." Cherie shot me a knowing look, half teasing. "Sounds like it made your job easier." I shrugged nonchalantly while Delaney grinned triumphantly. "I knew it." The sheriff dropped his hat onto the table. "Good grief. I can't tell if you're a bad influence on her or she's rubbing off on you." Cherie draped her arm around my shoulders. "He's stuck with a couple of strong-willed women now." I couldn't resist giving her a playful squeeze. Wouldn't have it any other way. She playfully bumped my shoulder with hers. Good to know. Delaney put on an exaggerated grimace and wrinkled her nose. Gross. Get a room. As we walked out to Sherry's truck, she brought up something she'd observed. I noticed a beat-up brown car parked near the yard on Saturday and Sunday. Had a guy inside who kept ducking down whenever someone passed by. You catch the maker model? I asked. Is rust a type of car? Sherry replied wryly. Looked like a decrepit little hatchback. Might need a tetanus shot to touch it. Didn't get too close, figured it might be worth your attention. Not likely gang-related, I mused. Delaney chimed in with a smirk. Could be that cop who lost his car. Heard he's been missing one. Yeah, we need to discuss that. I tried to maintain a serious tone, but Delaney's pleading eyes made me crack a smile. Cherie burst out laughing, and soon I joined in. All right, I managed between chuckles. You owe a quarter. Cherie shook her head, still grinning. I had to suspend our swear jar rule. Delaney would be bankrupt by now if we hadn't. Just until this whole mess is sorted. Delaney nodded emphatically. Yep, and that could take ages with you two. We all laughed as we climbed into the truck, relieved to have a moment of levity amid the unfolding chaos. Delaney cast a warm glance at her mother, her expression reflecting concern mixed with relief. Tiffany and Tara arrived at the cabin just a few hours later, bearing troubling news. Tara spoke first, her voice tinged with urgency. You need to be careful. Stein got tipped off and disappeared. They didn't give me specifics, but they think he's trying to leave the country. She shook her head slowly. I'm skeptical, though. The stop and hold on you wasn't legitimate. It was supposed to be authorized by Judge Knowlton, but he denies issuing it and his clerks back him up. The system it came from isn't even connected to the internet. Hacking it would be nearly impossible. Cherie was quick to pose the next question on all our minds. How long has Stein been an agent? Tara considered for a moment. 17 years. That's a lot to jeopardize. I sat up straighter, connecting the dots. A judge, a seasoned agent, and who knows who else. I thought back to the bounty placed on me. That's a lot of power. Tara nodded, her expression grave as she glanced briefly at Tiffany. This could be tied to Mother's shooting. She was hit 4 times in the back with a 9mm, and they ransacked the study. Cherie's concern was palpable, especially for Tara and Tiffany's sake. How's she holding up? Tiffany replied cautiously. She's stable after surgery, but we're worried about infections. She's conscious but not up for talking much. I tried to lighten the mood with a hint of humor. Maybe they didn't realize they needed silver bullets, or garlic, or silver-tipped garlic bullets, or a wooden stake. Less. Cherie cut in softly, shooting me a wink while maintaining a serious tone. I leaned back, gazing at the ceiling. Has she said anything about what happened? Tiffany's expression tightened. She claims she's too weak to remember or talk about it. Bullshit, I muttered under my breath. Tara nodded in agreement. She's definitely hiding something. I went through the study after the police left, but couldn't find anything useful. And the safe? She says she can't remember the combination. The tension in the room was palpable as we grappled with the mystery surrounding Mother's shooting and the unfolding events with Stein. Delaney, sprawled on the windowsill, idly tracing patterns on the glass, suddenly perked up. Unless she changed it after I left, I can open it. I can't tell you the numbers, but I remember the pattern. I thought she changed it after you figured out how to get Dad's gun? Tara scrutinized Delaney with a mix of curiosity and concern. Delaney shrugged nonchalantly. They were so busy ignoring me all the time. It was like I wasn't even there. I wanted to take the money from the safe and run away once, but running away didn't work out so well the first time. I needed to go somewhere I was actually wanted. She settled back onto the sill. Tiffany chuckled softly. She despised that feeling. She tries to hide it, but it eats at her every day. She'd prefer you joined the Manson family or a cult. Sherry's expression flickered between anger and sadness. Heaven forbid Delaney finds a family that loves her, huh? Yeah, I know, Tiffany sighed, glancing down at the floor. I don't understand why she's like that. When we were little, I know she cared. Maybe it was the money. I don't know. Delaney sat up abruptly, her face tensing. I don't give a damn. I know where I belong. I'm never going back. She hissed the words with fierce determination. Tara reached out cautiously. We know, and you're right. Even if something happens to Dad, Cherie has legal guardianship. I've drawn up the papers and made Mother agree to it. She turned to Cherie. I hope you don't mind, but I just can't trust Mother anymore. You and Dad just need to sign them. Cherie's face lit up with pride. We'll probably never need to use it, but of course I don't mind. Delaney belongs here. Delaney's expression softened into a crooked smile, relief washing over her features. I nodded solemnly. If Charlotte decides to fight it, you might have a legal battle on your hands. She's heavily medicated. If she does, the truth about Charles will come out. I'll ensure it, Tara asserted, her face etched with determination. She knows it. The following morning, we rendezvoused with Tara at Charlotte's ostentatious McMansion. Delaney and I had already caught a glimpse of the car Cherie had described when she dropped us off at the salvage yard to retrieve my Mustang. The little brown car turned out to be a 1973 Ford Pinto, and it was nearly miraculous that it was still operational. I had seen rusted heaps on the lot that seemed more roadworthy. We didn't have time to track it down further because we had promised to meet Tiffany and Tara at Charlotte's house, but at least we knew what to look for. Tara greeted us with a grin as she opened the door. Mother would have a fit if she knew you were here. I stepped inside, past Tara. She'd probably prefer we figure out who shot her in the back. She'd rather die than let you help her, Dad. I'm not trying to help her, just keeping Delaney safe, I replied. Delaney headed straight for the study and slid open the panel covering the wall safe. Glancing around, memories of my last visit to this room flooded back. The day Senator Charles Morris chose to end his own life, rather than face justice for his crimes against his daughter Delaney, though he never saw her that way. It had made the world a slightly better, cleaner place. Delaney managed to crack the safe on her first attempt, turning back to us with a smug grin. Tara stepped closer. 3 thumb drives and a stack of paperwork. I started sifting through the documents while Tara powered up her laptop to examine the thumb drives. Bills, a few overdue notices, and a ledger for C&M Consulting, I muttered, organizing them carefully. Chuck's death really shook her up. These overdue notices are all from around that time. Wow, that's a substantial amount of money. What exactly does that pool service do for her? I was about to make a joke about the pool boy, but stopped myself when I noticed Delaney listening intently. Tara raised an eyebrow but remained focused. The thumb drives are encrypted. I'll need to get the passkey from Mother. Any recent overdue bills? It looks like everything's current now. She spends a fortune on spa treatments, I replied, shaking my head in disbelief. Yeah, I remember her saying that a senator's wife has to look the part. Look the part of what? High Queen Empress of the fucking galaxy? Delaney snickered, but kept poking around the office. Tara sat up and closed her laptop. People have different priorities. Charlotte's priority is always Charlotte. Tara nodded solemnly. Yeah, it is. At least it has been since she met Charles. That fucking Pinto is behind us. Delaney kept her eyes forward, periodically checking the rearview mirror. The lessons from Camp Mayhem had ingrained themselves deep into her instincts. Do you think it's that Stein asshole? Not a fucking clue, but I'm done fucking around and waiting for someone else to do something. We're going to find out who it is. He's hanging back too far. When I round this corner, you slide over and take the rollback half a block down, stop, then put the disco lights on. Delaney released her seatbelt and positioned herself to slide along the bench seat, ready to take my place behind the wheel. I waited until we passed a large tree and then opened the door. We had executed this maneuver countless times, picking up wrecks. Dropping out of the door, I took cover behind the tree while Delaney, half standing, shifted over to the driver's seat. Despite barely reaching the pedals, she could drive better than most seasoned drivers out there. I gripped my 1911 and waited as Delaney maneuvered the rollback precisely half a block, brought it to a stop, and activated the emergency lights. For a moment, I thought the Pinto had turned off, but it eventually crept forward and came to a shuddering stop about 50 yards behind the truck. As I approached, I could see the back of the driver's head nervously peering forward. I walked up and tapped on the window of the car with the butt of my gun. I expected shock, maybe a hurried apology or stammering excuse. Pretty much anything but what happened next. My ears nearly blew out from his high-pitched shriek, and the car careened backwards without warning. I barely leaped back in time to avoid being clipped by the side mirror. The Pinto bounced over the curb, reversed into the ditch, and flipped upright, its wheels spinning. I stood there in shock for a moment, while Delaney sprinted up beside me to peer inside. "Jesus, what did you do?" she exclaimed. "Knocked on the window," I replied incredulously. She cocked her head and peered at the driver, who was frantically trying to unbuckle his seatbelt. "Mookie!" Mookie sat nervously between us, casting anxious glances back at the overturned Pinto on the rollback. I scrutinized him. "What the fuck is going on, Mookie? Why are you following us?" I mean, I'm not following." Delaney punched his shoulder with her bony fist. "Cut the crap. It's been a rough week. He might just shoot you, but I swear, I'll stab you in the nuts if you don't answer." She brandished a screwdriver from the glove compartment, shaking it threateningly. Mookie looked at me, seeking support that he wouldn't find, then slumped in resignation, his hands protectively crossed over his groin, eyes trained warily on Delaney. "I'm just trying to get my shit back." "What shit?" I pressed. He hesitated until Delaney waved the screwdriver menacingly. "Seed. I accidentally gave you a half-pound of prime seed." "Gave?" I raised an eyebrow. "I freaked out and grabbed the wrong bag, stuffed the tacos into it, and handed it to you. The stuff was taped at the bottom. I had it stashed in the cooler at work and was planning to take it home." I shook my head, exasperated. "You're gonna have to find more seed somewhere else, Mookie. We tossed that bag a week ago. We don't keep fast food bags in the truck." His expression crumpled. "Where?" "Look, it's probably in a landfill by now, wherever the trash pickup dumps stuff." He looked on the verge of tears. "I can't buy more. You can't buy this stuff at all. It wasn't just seed, it was G13 seed." Delaney sighed dramatically. "That stuff's bad news anyway." "I've been sparking up since I was 12 and it hasn't hurt me at all," Mookie defended. Delaney stared at him incredulously. "Wow, you really think you're normal?" Instead of getting into that debate, I asked a question I knew I might regret. "What the hell is G13? It's like the best shit ever. The CIA developed it. It's pure magic. Lots of people sell stuff they claim is G13, but this was the real deal. My cousin worked in a lab at the University of Mississippi and she smuggled it out. I set up my trailer with better security, got a new door, all to protect it." "Why not ask her for more?" I suggested. "She died, man. They said it was a car accident, but I don't know. CIA, you know?" Delaney rolled her eyes. "Paranoid much?" He shot her a look. "You don't get it. This stuff cures cancer. It really does. Janice heard them talking about it. That's why she got some seed out and gave it to me. A couple of suits came by asking if Janice had sent me anything, said they had a reward for it. I played dumb and said I didn't get anything." "So you're going to save mankind?" I chuckled. "I was going to grow it for seed, give a bunch of it out. That's the right thing to do. Those suits just want to make money." We pulled into the Taco Grande parking lot, and I shut off the truck. Can't help you, unless you want to dig through acres of landfill. Delaney opened her door, paused, and looked at me over Mookie's shoulder. What if we still had the bag? I shrugged. He can have it. I don't want anything to do with it. Delaney furrowed her brow thoughtfully. I think we might still have it. What? I saved the last 2 tacos for Mrs. Edwards' basset hound. You hate Mrs. Edwards. Yeah, I saved 2 cheesy bean tacos. I contemplated the effect of cheesy bean tacos on an aging basset hound's digestive system. You really hate Mrs. Edwards. She nodded, hopped down, and rummaged through the right side toolbox, retrieving a tattered bag. Mice got to the tacos. Which is why we don't keep food bags in the damn trucks, Delaney. She tore through the bag until she found a neatly folded plastic package taped to the bottom. The mice got into this too, just a little. She pointed to a chewed-off corner. Mookie stared at the bag in awe. That's it? See the University of Mississippi sticker on it? I examined it closely. It displayed some laboratory batch information and Strain G13 written in marker on the label corner. There was no University of Mississippi logo, just Hackman Pharmaceuticals neatly printed at the top. Delaney scrutinized it, sounding out the name as best she could. She looked at me with a questioning expression, and I shrugged. Big companies often fund research at universities. It's cheaper than doing it all themselves. A project like this needs a lot of space, and universities can get permits to grow things that companies can't. Weird. I guided Mookie's Pinto off the rollback. Aside from a broken taillight, it seemed to have weathered the ordeal fine. Delaney observed him with amusement as he carefully taped up the corner of his precious cargo using electrical tape from the toolbox. When he finally walked away to head to work, he seemed to have a noticeable spring in his step. Or maybe he just really needed to use the bathroom. Delaney giggled as she watched him walk away. I eyed her warily. No. No, what? Just no. We can't keep him? Our very own drug dealer? Jesus, no. He's not exactly Scarface. He'd hurt himself with a water gun. She snickered as we observed him finally figuring out to pull, not push, the front door open. We gazed at the single-wide trailer we had just managed to haul onto the lot. It was the last item we had cleared from the abandoned property that the county had paid us to clean up. 6 vehicles, 4 refrigerators, and a water heater tank were also among the haul. The mobile home itself had been left there a couple of years ago, and surprisingly, it was in better condition than I had expected. What are we doing with this? Delaney surveyed the trailer. We'll sell it. It's 30 years old, but someone will probably want it if we deliver it. It's not in bad shape, and it'll make a decent little home for someone. We don't have to charge a lot. We got it for free, so anything we make is profit. That's kind of neat. Delaney had her own ideas about what constituted neat in a house, but the thought of providing a small home for someone who couldn't afford more seemed appealing to her. We headed into the office, where Delaney grabbed her helmet and slipped it on. You want a jalapeno dog? Maybe a ham roll this time. Let's mix it up. I'll head over there in a few minutes. I just need to finish this quarterly report. I settled at the small desk in the office and started sorting through the numbers. Delaney snapped the chin strap of her helmet. I'm taking the alley behind the sheriff's department. Stein might still be out there. I agree with Tara about him. He had to have serious incentive to try what he did. She nodded resolutely. I won't take any chances. Less than 20 minutes later, I arrived at the sheriff's office, where I found Cherie consoling a shaken and angry Delaney. That bastard wrecked my moped. Delaney's voice was filled with a mix of horror and fury. I had seen the remnants of her moped on the way in, now just a twisted heap of red and white metal, half buried under the department's fence. Delaney repeated herself several times, her adrenaline slowly wearing off as she recounted what had happened. The tears welling in her eyes were more from rage than fear now. The sheriff entered and took a seat at his desk. We've located the F-150. It was reported stolen in Richmond last night, and one of my deputies found it abandoned a couple of miles outside town. We have units out searching, but—" He gestured helplessly. Delaney bit her lip and exhaled deeply. The driver was a big guy, muscular. It wasn't Stein. He was waiting in the parking lot of the auto parts store. Just ... She slapped her hands together in frustration. Like that. I have the security footage here. The sheriff pulled it up on his computer, and we crowded around to watch. The grainy video showed Delaney on her moped, cautiously navigating along the fence. Suddenly, the truck burst into view at high speed, plowing into the moped and dragging it along the fence for several yards. The sheriff frowned deeply. That was no accident, and it seems the truck had been parked there for at least an hour and a half, waiting. Cherie held Delaney close, her concern palpable. "How did you—" The sheriff rewound the footage, playing it back in slow motion. We watched as Delaney skillfully evaded the truck, rolling under its front bumper and then darting under the damaged fence toward the camera. Delaney shivered, looking at me weakly. "I don't even remember doing that." She managed a faint smile. "At least I didn't wet myself. I need to use the bathroom." Cherie accompanied her daughter, not letting go for a moment. I turned to the sheriff, my expression grim. "I understand. We'll do our best to handle this without involving you any more than necessary. But we have no clue what triggered this. It's clearly targeted at Delaney." The sheriff rubbed his forehead wearily. "Keep me posted, and for God's sake, be careful." I nodded. "Will do." As I left the office, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were just scratching the surface of something much larger and more dangerous than we had anticipated. Cherie, with a tight-lipped and grim expression, guided Delaney back into the office. "Les, I think you need to call Tiffany and let her know you have to talk to your ex-wife. This all started around the same time she got shot." I couldn't argue with that. We entered the room, passing by a pair of nurses checking Charlotte's vital signs, monitoring her through tubes and wires. Charlotte took a slow breath and fixed a steady gaze on Cherie. "I don't want her here." I shrugged. "Wish in one hand and crap in the other. See which fills up first, Charlie." I noticed Cherie giving me a slightly disapproving look, but there was a hint of amusement in her expression. "What's she doing here anyway?" Charlotte asked, her tone sharp. Cherie flashed a fake smile. "I'm just here to keep Les from acting on his more base instincts, like maybe suffocating you with a pillow." Charlotte turned her gaze to me. "I don't feel comfortable with her here. Did you know she used to be an exotic dancer?" Her voice held a hint of triumph, as if she expected this revelation to shock me. I glanced over at Cherie. "An exotic dancer? Really?" Cherie shrugged. "Not sure about exotic. I was born less than 50 miles from here." She wrinkled her nose. "And dancing wasn't exactly my forte, but as long as the girls made an appearance, nobody seemed to mind." I nodded gravely. "Yeah, that makes sense." Charlotte realized I wasn't fazed and turned to me with a look of resentment. "Strippers are easy girls. Everyone knows that." Cherie leaned forward, her smile dripping with sarcasm. "It might be best if you just stopped talking for a while." "Or what?" Charlotte rolled her eyes. "Or nothing, honey. Just trying to help you out." "Really?" "See, I was dancing to pay off a court fine. Got myself in trouble for smashing up the truck of a cheating asshole boyfriend. Spent 3 months in county lockup, then had to cough up a $3,000 fine. It was a brand new truck." Charlotte's face fell as she realized Cherie hadn't been hiding anything from me. Cherie pressed on. "That was a lot of money, and the judge doesn't have a sense of humor about unpaid fines. I had to do something. But that's not the important part for you." Charlotte's patience was wearing thin. "So what is important to me?" "Well, you see, I was working there to pay off the fine, but most of the girls were working there to pay their way through college." She paused, and I noticed the mischievous glint in her eyes that usually appeared when she drew a straight flush in poker. Nursing students, mostly. Charlotte took a moment to absorb this, then glanced over at the two nurses who had been attending to her equipment. The older nurse was giving her a cold stare with narrowed eyes, while the younger redhead openly glared at her. Oh. The older nurse straightened up. We'll just give you three some privacy. She nodded to Charlotte. I'm the day shift nurse supervisor. You can just call me Jasmine. She reached out and touched Cherie's shoulder. Nice to see you again, Candy. Be sure to say hi on your way out. I waited until they closed the door. You had an investigator tailing us? Not very smart to put a private eye on me with everything Charles was involved in. Could have dragged you down by accident. Charlotte sighed in frustration. Just a computer background check on you and her. I did it after Delaney. Chose to come live with you before Charles's unexpected death. I just wanted to be sure she'd be okay. I wasn't expecting you to stir up half of North Carolina. I didn't respond to that, especially not in a room filled with electronic devices. I changed the subject. So what's really going on? Somebody shoots you, I get rolled up by a crooked cop on a bad warrant who seems overly interested in Delaney. The judge has ties to Chucky's old law firm. I may have inadvertently triggered something. She shifted uncomfortably. May have? You know Charles wasn't Delaney's father. A bad feeling soaked through me. So who was? I'm afraid I'm not certain. Jesus Christ, Charlie. Is this one or two guys and uncertain timing? Or are we talking half the Virginia Bar Association and I don't have eyes in the back of my head here? She sat up primly. We were entertaining a great deal at that particular period in time. Cherie raised one eyebrow at me, clearly holding back from questioning Charlotte's audacity in accusing others of being promiscuous. Fuck. I took a moment to look out the window. So these are all real movers and shakers, guys who could have helped Chuck's damn career, right? But it's been over 14 years. Why would anyone do anything now? She remained silent, gazing out the window. Charlie, what the holy hell did you do? She pursed her lips. You have to understand. The election campaign very nearly bankrupted us. We spent a great deal and even had to borrow money. Charlie. I may have let a few men know that I would appreciate some assistance in supporting their daughter. She said it quickly, as if the speed of her words would prevent me from fully comprehending them. Charlotte had never once offered financial support for Delaney. Not that I would have accepted it. We stared wordlessly at each other. Damn. You were leveraging lawyers and judges? Not blackmail, just seeking a little help to secure my financial stability. I have to maintain a certain standard of living. That CM Consulting financial record, that was it, wasn't it? Your little game could get Delaney killed. There was at least a small flicker of guilt over that. I didn't think anyone would be that aggressive. They're respectable men, and I was careful not to ask for too much. Respectable? Like Chuck? That bastard tried to have Delaney killed for votes and planned to exploit Tara at the firm, just like he did you. She winced at that truth, and I hoped it stung deep enough to leave a lasting impression. That's not relevant at the moment. Okay then, let's talk about relevant. Let's forget about just how many guys you loved to give Chuck a leg up. Let's narrow it down from half the damn population. How many of them could have influenced Judge Knowlton? Knowlton issued the warrant against me. I thought you said it was a bad warrant. He claims he didn't sign it, and that one of the court clerks must have forged it. Nobody can prove shit, but I'm not buying it. She looked thoughtful. Just the senior partners, I suppose. Not Burns, he's gay. So Sharpton, Franks, and the Callaways. The Callaways? Father and son, they're both partners. So which one? I trailed off as she gave me a stone face. Jesus, both, right? She nodded. Cherie glanced at her. Oh dear, please tell me it wasn't at the same time. Of course not. Charlotte turned to me, away from Cherie. Over her shoulder, I could see Cherie mouth the word ho and roll her eyes. The older Calloway couldn't be her father, though. It was only one time. He had prostate surgery shortly after that. We left as soon as we could, Cherie dragging me out. I think she caught me eyeing the extra pillow. I had just come out from rearranging the battery shed when I nearly tripped over Delaney. I wonder what that's about. Delaney paused in her tire rolling to glance at the black SUV parked outside the closed gate. Most teenagers would have used it as an excuse to slack off, but not Delaney. She worked hard so she could get back to tinkering with her car, engrossed in the meticulous task of rebuilding the engine. Following her gaze, I spotted the SUV with a county sheriff's car behind it. The deputy, likely Hyatt from her stature, was in conversation with the driver. She wasn't writing a ticket, but rather examining something he handed her, stepping back towards the rear of his vehicle with a discernibly uneasy expression. It didn't look like a friendly exchange, and we watched until the SUV departed. The deputy seemed about to return to her cruiser but noticed us and headed our way. I gestured for her to join us at the smaller gate by the sidewalk, and she met us there. She greeted Delaney with a smile that quickly faded as she turned to me. "Sir, what can I do for you?" I asked. I have reason to believe the man in the black SUV was taking pictures of Delaney, but the SD card from his camera was removed, so I didn't have any proof. With everything that's been going on, I thought you should know. Damn, even if you did have proof, there wouldn't be much you could have done about it. He was armed. He's licensed as a personal security guard. Given recent events, I thought it was important for you to be aware. Any idea who he's working for? He didn't strike me as a typical security guard. He had the whole hoodie and baggy jeans look going on, and he gave off an air of having frequent run-ins with law enforcement. His license said Gold Shield Security. I've never heard of them, but it checked out when I ran it. Did you get his name? John Ellis. I ran a background check. No warrants or felonies, but he has a history of misdemeanor battery and assault charges. Delaney fixed Hyatt with a steady gaze. Did you witness him taking pictures of me? Hyatt shook her head. I didn't see it happen, but the missing SD card is a strong indication. Unfortunately, it's not something I could detain him for, and it wouldn't hold up for probable cause. It was Burton Murkowski who called it in. He was on a taco delivery to Friendship Village and thought the guy looked suspicious. Mookie? Delaney's lips curled into a half smile. Delivering tacos to Friendship Village? Hyatt chuckled. Yeah, Mookie. He's a character, that one. Always well-intentioned. They do love their tacos out there. Her expression hinted at a knowing understanding of why. Delaney nodded knowingly. If Mrs. Ramirez offers you a brownie, you should probably pass. We've heard, I interjected. Thanks for running off that guy. Hyatt nodded. Be careful. I've got a bad feeling about him. Delaney flashed a mischievous grin. Up for another poker game sometime? Hyatt laughed. No way. I think you've got some tricks up your sleeve. A fair is a place where you buy corn dogs and funnel cakes. Delaney mused, trailing off wistfully. Oh, funnel cakes. I could see Delaney was on the same wavelength as me. Maybe Mookie knew more than he let on. Despite his fear of the cops, and possibly us, that fear might just work to our advantage. We should swing by and thank Mookie for calling it in, I suggested. Maybe he saw something else. Delaney nodded eagerly. Yeah, he might have noticed something we missed. Hyatt raised an eyebrow. Just be careful, both of you. Mookie's a bit unpredictable. We'll keep that in mind, I assured her, as Delaney started rolling the tire back towards the stacks with renewed determination. Mookie had already left Taco Grande by the time we arrived, so we decided to swing by his trailer on the way home, especially since Cherie was running a bit late from work. Opting for a change, we pulled out my piebald Mustang Cobra, Sally, from the garage. It had been a while, and I could use a good drive. Navigating the spur road leading to Mookie's trailer wasn't difficult. I had used it years ago to tow a couple of abandoned cars for the county, long before Mookie converted his place into a grow house. As we rounded a wooded bend, a sleek black car shot past us. It was hard to get a good look, but I caught sight of two men inside wearing tactical 501 shirts, definitely not the hoodie and baggy pants types. The driver's obvious annoyance hinted that trouble might be brewing ahead. Moments later, we burst into a small clearing and were greeted by the glow of flames engulfing the end of Mookie's trailer. "He's inside!" Delaney pointed towards Mookie's patched-up Pinto parked nearby. I brought Sally to a screeching halt off to the side to ensure she wouldn't be in harm's way, then leaped out and dashed towards the front door. I yanked on the handle, but Mookie's fortified door, designed to keep thieves out of his grow house, held fast. It seemed like his security measures might now be working against him. Before I could think of an alternative, Delaney was thrusting a crowbar from Sally's trunk into my hands with a smug grin. I wedged the crowbar into the door jamb near the lock and exerted all my strength until the door finally gave way with a satisfying pop. Mookie wasn't wrong. It was a sturdy door, but it was still mounted on an aging single wide. The intense wave of heat from the flames almost knocked me back, but I gritted my teeth and pushed through the doorway. The air was thick with roiling black smoke as I dropped down, plunging into the clear space beneath it. Crawling forward, I found myself face to face with Mookie's skinny backside, his rear end barely a foot from my nose. Grabbing his belt, I started to pull him backwards, feeling for the doorframe with my foot, when a hand latched onto my ankle and began pulling me back. Delaney, halfway in and halfway out of the doorway, guided me safely back. We tumbled in a heap down the flimsy aluminum steps. "Is he alive?" Delaney, tears streaking through the soot on her face, tried to rouse Mookie. I sat up, reaching over just as he let out a weak cough. "Thank God." Delaney managed a crooked grin through her distress. "I knew you liked him. How can you not like somebody named Mookie?" "Fuck no, I was just afraid I'd have to try to resuscitate him. It'd be like giving mouth to a damn bong. I'd wake up in Cleveland with no shoes, no shirt, and 24 cents in bent pennies in my pocket. What would the sheriff say?" "That's oddly specific." She snickered as we helped Mookie sit up. Half his hair was singed by the heat, lucky it hadn't caught fire. Angry bruises were forming on the left side of his face. Delaney suddenly looked back down the road. "I think they're coming back." I strained to listen and heard the Audi's engine growing louder. They must have reached the main road and decided to return, intent on finishing the job and eliminating witnesses. Shit. I scanned our surroundings. Moments later, a siren wailed from the same direction, followed by the distinct pops of a handgun. Catching Delaney's eye, I knew we needed to get Mookie behind Sally. The situation was about to escalate into chaos. As we reached the Mustang's rear, the Audi emerged from the trees, skidding to a stop next to the Pinto. Before it had even settled, a deputy's cruiser roared in, blocking the road. Two men in suits leaped out of the Audi almost simultaneously, brandishing Glocks and firing at the cruiser. Seconds later, shots erupted from near the front bumper of the cruiser. Fuck this. I stepped past Delaney and Mookie, reaching under the dash for my .45. "Stay down." Delaney flattened herself to peer under the car, perhaps not what I intended, but there was no time to argue. Moving forward, I found a clear line of sight on both gunmen. Blinded by the inferno of the trailer, they hadn't noticed me. I prayed the deputy would realize we were allies and hold his fire. The driver spun as the first two rounds from the 1911 punched through his chest. His companion, focused on the deputy, reacted too slowly. Another double tap caught him, the first round center mass, and the second punching up through his collarbone into his neck. Neither of them would be getting back up. Hoping Deputy Hyatt was watching, I held up the 1911, ejected the magazine, and locked the slide back, sending the chambered round flying into the darkness. "Clear!" A weak tapping sound drew my attention to the ground near the front tire. Shit. I sprinted to where Deputy Hyatt lay, quickly stashing the gun in my belt. All 4 feet 10 inches of her were staring up at me, gasping in pain. Hit. Twice. Knee. And... She shook violently for a moment. Arm. Delaney. Trauma kit. Now. Delaney must have been already moving because she slid to a stop beside me, thrusting the kit into my hands. Work fast. I'm getting Sally. We need to call. Delaney cut me off, gripping my shoulder. I don't think we have time. Remember how you told me? Most cars don't explode? The way she emphasized most caught my attention. The Pinto? The Pinto. It's on fire. Fuck. With the cars packed tightly, the small clearing was about to become an inferno. The Pinto might not actually explode, but in this confined space, it wouldn't matter much. I could hear Sally roaring to life as I struggled to remove Hyatt's vest and assess the wounds. She wasn't bleeding out, a good sign. I quickly checked her knee. Plenty of blood, looked like a tib-fib injury. Both bones near the knee shattered. It must have been excruciating, but she had a little time. Delaney pulled up next to me, reclining the passenger seat all the way back so I could easily pull Deputy Hyatt in beside me and slam the door shut. She winced as Hyatt's leg jostled. Go! Sally surged past the cruiser, and I heard a crunching noise, but it was drowned out by the explosion of the Pinto's gas tank, filling the clearing with flames. I'm sorry. God, I'm sorry. Delaney looked stricken. We made it. I quickly applied pressure to Hyatt's arm wound, then grabbed a roll splint to stabilize her injured knee. Your mirror. There wasn't enough room, and the mirror on this side. I couldn't help but chuckle. I can replace it. It's just a mirror, princess. I'd trade that for third-degree burns any day. Delaney eased off the accelerator. I can stop here if you want. Keep going. There's a propane tank by the trailer. I continued working on Hyatt as we drove another mile down the road, glancing back to see flames shooting into the sky where we'd left the scene. Sheriff better have his insurance paid up for that cruiser. Delaney suddenly slowed and flashed the brights. We better approach slowly. They look angry. Every available deputy seemed to be at the roadblock, shotguns at the ready. Delaney turned off Sally's engine and stepped out cautiously with her hands raised. Deputy Hyatt's been shot. Needles is tending to her. He's coming out now. I managed to get Hyatt on the ground, and 2 EMTs were beside me in an instant. The one with the blonde crew cut swiftly assessed her injuries as I recounted what had happened. This is impressive work. Did you do this in a moving car? Didn't have much choice. Done it in Humvees a few times anyway. How did you get here so fast? When the deputy called in shots fired, the sheriff put out an all-call. He figured someone was in trouble. Delaney hurried over to the sheriff and engaged in a spirited conversation. As we began loading Hyatt into the ambulance, Delaney dashed over and leaned close to her. You still owe me those candy bars. Don't think you're getting out of it this way. Hyatt blinked her eyes open and tried not to laugh. All right, I'll pay up, though I'm still convinced you cheated somehow. Delaney grinned mischievously. We didn't have electricity for 4 months when we first moved to the cabin, so we played poker every night. Hyatt shot me a playful glare. You turned her into a card shark? What? It was homeschooling, teaching her math, I defended myself. Hyatt chuckled weakly as the EMTs loaded her into the ambulance and pulled away. The sheriff approached us. Delaney filled me in, 2 suspects down, possibly Deputy Hyatt, and maybe you. He eyed me sternly. That's fine. They fired on one of my deputies, so they're marked for it. We'll sort out the specifics later. I'll need your firearm for ballistic testing. He glanced up at the burning wreckage in the distance. It'll be morning before we can recover the bodies. I nodded, handing over my gun carefully. Will I get it back? It shouldn't come back with any issues on a ballistics check, right? Not this one. Car compactors were perfect for disposing of evidence. A 2-ton steel origami wrapper tended to discourage any thorough investigations. He paused briefly, seeming to gather his patience. All right, you'll probably get it back. I'm sure you've got half a dozen more stashed away somewhere anyway. I shrugged nonchalantly. Sure, I had another 1911 hidden in the trunk, in a discreet spot under the carpet. But that was my business to know. He leaned back, a curious expression on his face. I do have one question. Where's Mookie? Delaney nonchalantly shrugged. In the trunk. What else was I supposed to do with him? We circled around Sally, and Delaney popped the trunk. There lay Mookie, snoring peacefully, his head resting on my trunk liner. The sheriff raised an eyebrow at Delaney. You got him in there by yourself? She grinned mischievously. I move wheels and tires all day. I managed to get his top half in and poured the rest of him in. I assessed Mookie's condition. We should probably drop him off at the hospital to get checked out. He seems okay, but he definitely has some smoke inhalation and maybe a mild concussion. The sheriff nodded wearily. I'll arrange for an ambulance. Delaney glanced at Mookie, her lips twisting in contemplation. It would be a shame to wake him up just to put him in an ambulance. I agreed, looking at Mookie. He does look pretty peaceful. Let's drop him off and then check on Hyatt. Delaney closed the trunk, and I started up Sally. She dialed Cherie's number as we drove. After a brief conversation, Delaney hung up. Cherie says that gives her enough time to clean up before we use all the hot water. She's relieved we got Mookie and Hyatt out of there, especially since this time, it wasn't our fault. When we arrived at the hospital and popped the trunk, Mookie stirred awake, blinking bleary-eyed at us. Man, I had the worst nightmare. He pulled himself up to a sitting position and climbed out of the trunk, showing no surprise at finding himself there. Those 2 suits, they took my stuff and torched my place. He trailed off, staring up at the hospital sign, then winced as he touched the side of his face. Aw, no. They burned my place, didn't they? I raised my hands in a helpless gesture. Mookie, we did everything we could to get you out. By the time we arrived, it was too late for the trailer. He sighed heavily. One of them took my stash, too. Yeah, I'm afraid it's all gone this time. Those suits got into a shootout with Deputy Hyatt outside our place. They didn't make it, and the fire pretty much razed everything. His expression fell. Gone? I nodded solemnly. Gone. Mookie looked down at his feet, clearly disheartened. This sucks, man. Delaney shot him a sharp glare. Hyatt got shot trying to stop those guys. That's why we're here. Mookie rubbed his forehead wearily and looked up at the hospital sign with glassy eyes. Nobody was supposed to get hurt. It's just weed, not meth. This isn't like Breaking Bad or some shit. He glanced at us. Is she here? Can we see her? We escorted him inside and immediately came across the sheriff standing in the waiting area outside the surgery rooms. Having lights and sirens helps when you need to get somewhere fast. He motioned for us to come closer. Doc says she should pull through. Can't promise anything, but she didn't lose too much blood, and it looks like they missed anything vital. Won't be able to see anyone until tomorrow afternoon if everything goes well. She seemed stable when we loaded her into the ambulance. She's tough. She'll make it, I assured him. He flipped open his notebook. I spoke with her briefly before she went in. Pain meds were kicking in enough for her to focus. Seems like they hit her during the initial traffic stop, shot through the door when she tried to get out. She blocked them, fired back, so they bolted back towards Mookie's. That fits, I replied, nodding thoughtfully. Unless they were after something else, I muttered, my mind racing with possibilities. Something more than just marijuana seeds. Delaney frowned, her brow furrowing. Like what? I hesitated, trying to piece together the fragments of the chaotic events of the evening. I don't know yet, but think about it. Why come in guns blazing over a few ounces of weed? There has to be more to it. Mookie glanced up from where he sat on the floor, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. I don't know what they wanted, man. They just came in, guns drawn, demanding the package. They didn't say much, just took it and set the place on fire. The sheriff leaned forward, his brow furrowing. What package? Mookie swallowed hard, his eyes darting between us. I don't know exactly. A package came in last week, addressed to me. It had some seeds inside, but there was something else in there too. Some documents or something. I didn't really look through it all. The sheriff straightened, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Documents? What kind of documents? Mookie shook his head, struggling to recall. I don't know, man. Looked official, like legal papers or something. I didn't think much of it, just tossed them aside. Delaney shot me a knowing look. Could those documents have been valuable? Maybe someone was after them, not the weed. I nodded slowly, the pieces starting to click into place. It's possible. If those documents were sensitive or incriminating, someone might go to extreme lengths to get their hands on them. The sheriff sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. Well, we'll have to piece this together. Needles, I'll talk to you later tonight. For now, take Mookie home, get some rest. We'll figure this out. As we headed back to Sally, Delaney glanced at me with concern in her eyes. Do you think this is going to get worse before it gets better? I sighed, rubbing my temples. I don't know, Delaney. But we're in this now, whether we like it or not. She nodded, her expression resolute. All right, let's get Mookie home. We'll deal with the rest later. I unlocked Sally's doors, and as we got in, the weight of the night's events settled heavily on us. The mystery surrounding the package and the violence that followed hung in the air, promising more questions than answers as we drove into the night. Unless somebody really believes what Mookie said about it curing cancer. But that's nuts. Delaney stared out the window, her expression troubled. A class of new drivers started the week we left Texas. They sent 2 guys home because they tested positive for marijuana. They'll do that. Kurt told us why. He said it slows your reflexes and makes it harder to think clearly. She shuddered. I can't imagine wanting to make it harder to think or read or... Her voice trailed off, a hint of distress coloring her tone. I understood immediately where her thoughts were going. Delaney often struggled with feelings of inadequacy due to her dyslexia, despite all the support from Cherie and me. Reading remained a challenge, and it always would be. Yeah, it's probably not something you'd want to use. She nodded slowly, then managed a small smile. I know I'm a pain in the ass, but at least you don't have to worry about that. Just wandering power sanders. She rolled her eyes playfully. So with all the shooting and the burning and shit, it's the sander that bothers you. I'm used to the shooting and burning and shit, but I hate it when my tools aren't where they're supposed to be. Delaney chuckled. Oh my God, the end of the world. A misplaced power sander. I shook my head with mock solemnity. It's a sad world when sanders get misplaced. It was one of those quirks that defined us. Delaney knew she could playfully test my patience, and I would grumble about it, but deep down it was part of what made us work. Her smile softened, and I could see her relax into our familiar banter. As we pulled up next to the cabin, Delaney glanced over her shoulder. Damn, the sheriff must have left just after we did. I glanced in the mirror and saw blue and white disco lights approaching rapidly from behind. Without hesitation, I slammed Sally into park. Take the phone, get into the woods and call the sheriff. Delaney stared at me in disbelief. What? The sheriff and his men use red, white, and blue lights. Not blue and white. That's a state cop thing. Shit. What are you... Go, damn it. She leaped out of the car and darted around the cabin as I hit the trunk release and dropped out the door to the ground. I had intended to reach for the 1911 in my trunk, but bullets were already striking Sally's rear end. I didn't recognize the passenger, a bullet-headed man in a gray t-shirt, but I immediately hoped Delaney was making good time when I saw the driver. Stein, looking like a frazzled raccoon with his two black eyes, was yelling at his partner. "Just put him the fuck down and get that little bitch." I moved as swiftly as I could, but the gunman had a clear shot at me, and he seemed composed. I had almost resigned myself to being shot for the fourth time in my life when the thunderous blast of a shotgun erupted from the front window of the cabin, startling everyone into silence. The assailant staggered back, his chest blooming with red. A second deafening shot sent him crashing to the ground. The distinct sound of shattered glass raining down was the only noise for a moment. Stein dropped into a crouch to avoid being in the line of fire and swiftly maneuvered around the car, intent on getting a shot at me. Asshole or not, his training showed. Losing his partner hadn't rattled his nerves. Just as he was about to round the car with a grin, something whizzed from the side of the cabin, cracking him across the face and sending him sprawling to the ground. He staggered back a couple of steps, blood streaming from his nose. Without hesitation, I dove for his partner's kimber. Delaney cheered triumphantly from around the corner. "Asshole!" He straightened up, his face contorted with rage. "You little bitch!" Rolling to my feet, I shoved the muzzle of the kimber against his temple and pulled the trigger. He collapsed instantly, and I stood over him, shaking my head. "I fucking warned you about calling her that." Not that he could hear it now. Cherie emerged from the front of the cabin, shotgun held cautiously at her side. "Is that all of them?" "I think so." A quick glance confirmed Stein's partner was dead. Delaney cautiously stepped around the corner. "Sorry, I know I was supposed to run, but the cell fell out of my pocket when I ran." She picked it up from the ground. "So I kinda improvised." I shrugged. "Well, I'm glad you did. It worked out." Cherie eyed Stein and his partner suspiciously until she was satisfied they were no longer a threat. "I was just finishing up my hair when I heard the shooting. Wasn't exactly planning on a gunfight." Delaney chuckled. "I was wondering about that." Cherie adjusted her pink "Virginia Beach is for lovers" t-shirt and tried to look annoyed, though a smile played on her lips. "Next time, give me a heads up so I can put on some coveralls too, all right?" I pretended to consider it. "I don't know, I kinda like it this way." Delaney let out a long, dramatic sigh. "God, of course you do." "Ew." Then she burst into giggles. I kept a close eye on Cherie, noticing she seemed surprisingly composed given the circumstances. "Someone's coming," Delaney pointed out, nodding towards approaching headlights. We exchanged a quick glance before Cherie grabbed the 12 gauge and positioned herself behind Stein's car. I holstered the kimber and retrieved the backup 1911 from its hiding spot in Sally's trunk. Delaney picked up Stein's gun, took a deep breath, and looked at me. I nodded at her. "Stay close to Cherie." The sheriff's Tahoe slowed to a stop as he surveyed the scene. Once he could see us clearly under the cabin's light, I placed the 1911 on the hood of Stein's car. He stepped out cautiously, hand hovering near his sidearm. "I'm sure there's one hell of an interesting story here, Needles." Stein. "Shit. You guys okay?" "Cars shot up, but we're all fine." "Any more of them?" "Just these two." He keyed his microphone and reported in, eyeing the bodies. He glanced over at Delaney. "Aw, hell, you're letting little Miss Mayhem play with guns now?" Delaney looked startled and quickly set Stein's gun on Sally's hood. Before she could say anything, I jumped in. "That's Stein's piece. We weren't sure it was you coming up the road. It's been a long damn night." He nodded thoughtfully, pacing around the scene and assessing the angles. "Leave it to you two to end up in two unrelated firefights in one damn evening." The sheriff examined the shotgun pattern on Stein's partner, then glanced at Cherie with a raised eyebrow. "You okay?" She met his gaze with a resolute stare. "They went after my baby and my man. I'd do it again tomorrow, and the day after, as many times as it takes." "Good call. We'll make sure that's clear in your statement. Should put any questions to rest. Stein was armed and dangerous, so this should be straightforward. I'll need to collect your guns, though." I retrieved the Kimber and placed it on the hood. Never fired mine. Had to use one of theirs. Still have to check, he chuckled. Is this 1911 going to come up hot on a ballistics check? Shouldn't. It's practically brand new. I haven't shot hardly anyone with it yet. With all this chaos, I don't like the idea of leaving you unarmed. Need to borrow a piece? I've got another. And a spare shotgun. Jesus, Les, how many do you have? As many as I need. Cherie set the shotgun down on Sally's hood. If you two are going to stand around chatting, I'm going to get dressed. She looked at Delaney. You should probably go clean up. Delaney nodded eagerly. Yeah, I'm definitely overdue for a shower. The sheriff chuckled as he started securing the weapons. All right, get yourselves sorted. I'll finish up here and we'll reconvene later for statements. With that, the two of them marched into the cabin. Cherie carrying herself as if being caught out in a t-shirt and underwear was perfectly normal. You're a lucky man, Needles, the sheriff remarked. Wouldn't trade them for anything. I talked to Mookie, and he can't lie for shit, so I know he told the truth when he said he had a run-in with those two over a package his cousin sent. That means that shit earlier had nothing to do with you two. We were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Right place, right time, or I'd have been out a deputy and Mookie'd have burned to death. But I have to ask, what the hell were you doing there in the first place? We were going to thank Mookie for calling in the goon taking pictures of Delaney at the yard and ask if he'd seen anything else. I don't know if that's connected with Stein or just a random perv. Could even have been an amateur photographer with no sense, the sheriff said, holding his hands up in frustration. The way things have been lately, I doubt it. Maybe a spotter for Stein. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Be careful, there may be more out there. You sure this is connected with the attack on your ex-wife? The timing alone is pretty convincing. I paused, considering. Stein's gun looks like a Smith & Wesson M&P9. I heard a rumor that Charlotte was shot with a 9mm. You might want to have someone check the ballistics on Stein's gun here. He seemed awfully interested in Delaney. I hesitated, not wanting to reveal everything Charlotte had told me. He seemed particularly curious about who Delaney's biological father might be. Not, I take it, the late unlamented senator? The sheriff raised an eyebrow sardonically. Apparently not, I replied, nodding. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. I can write it up so he comes off as an obsessed pervert abusing his office to target a 14-year-old girl. That kind of thing happens, and the state might find it convenient to turn a blind eye if I don't make it too obvious. Maybe suggest he crossed paths with her while investigating the attack on your ex. Hell, that might be the truth anyway. And if he was working for someone else for some other reason, they won't know we're on to them. Yeah, that whole fake warrant business still bothers me. Me too. I spotted a procession of lights heading up the road, with distant sirens getting closer. Looks like your team's arrived. Delaney emerged from the front door. I'm grabbing half a sheet of plywood from the workshop to cover the window until I can fix it. She made her way toward the small outbuilding. The sheriff smiled slightly, his gaze following her. She's taken on the role of caretaker for the cabin. She loves the fact that every piece was handmade for a family. Whenever there's a repair, she insists on doing it herself, with hand tools. Watching her drag the sheet from the shed, he added, Seems like she didn't have much give a damn in her life until you and Cherie came along. Charlotte treated her like a total failure, made her feel stupid and isolated, I explained. Yeah, got that vibe. Your ex-wife struck me as cold as ice. You know, leave a dog alone on a chain. It gets mean with anyone who comes near. Maybe she needs to relearn that not everyone's an enemy. He glanced toward the approaching lights. The deputies will want your statement. Standing up, he called out to Delaney, Need a hand with that? The next morning, we struggled to rise from bed. The previous night had been spent filling out witness statements and observing the crime scene technicians at work. Despite my concerns about Cherie having to shoot Stein's accomplice, she slept soundly. nestled close to me with a serene smile on her face. It helped that she had declared it movie night, sandwiched comfortably between Delaney and me on the couch. Delaney and I made our way to the salvage yard early the next morning. The sheriff was already waiting for us, and Delaney waved to him before heading into the trailer to tackle her schoolwork. He offered me a cup of coffee from Quick Mart. Just giving you a heads up, the state is backing away from investigating Stein. His office doesn't want the headache of dealing with a potential child predator, so they're leaning towards ignoring motive and calling it self-defense. The other guy has no ID, at least nothing legitimate. We're running his fingerprints. If we find anything, I'll let you know. Not suspicious at all, I remarked dryly. Could have been a pro, he mused. He moved like one, maybe ex-cop or military. Took a few hits, just bad luck. Shotguns'll do that, he nodded. How's Cherie holding up? Slept through the night like a baby, I replied. Good to hear, he said, jotting notes in his notebook. Speaking of IDs, one wallet survived the fire at Mookie's. We'll need dental records to ID them, but I doubt we'll get anything useful. IDs in the wallet were sophisticated fakes, a Mississippi driver's license with a non-existent number, cash cards maxed out. Nothing personal, nothing traceable. The vehicle they used was a rental under a fake name. Coroner thinks their dental work looks European. Different materials than what's common here. Pros targeting Mookie, I concluded. Yeah, they seemed well prepared, the sheriff agreed. Doesn't make any sense, does it? I remarked, shaking my head. Unless whatever he got from his cousin was really valuable to someone, the sheriff pondered. It's gone now, burned in the fire, I pointed out. He nodded thoughtfully. Yeah, I made sure to note that in the official reports. Package, unopened, contents unknown, destroyed in fire. It might help, I agreed. Can't hurt. Whatever Mookie thinks, this can't be about weed. Not with pros involved, the sheriff concluded with a shake of his head. And none of this links with Gold Shield security as far as I can tell, so watch your back. We will, just watch yours too, I assured him. I dialed the phone and waited. K2 Executive Services. How may I assist you? A professional voice answered. This is Lester Dawes. I need to speak with Kurt or Katie, I requested. Hold one, please, the voice replied promptly. A minute later, another voice came on the line. Needles? Kim? I was trying to reach Kurt, I said. Dad's out of the country, but you're on our short list if you need help, Kim informed me. Just some information. I'm putting you on speakerphone on our end, I informed her. Okay, Kim acknowledged. As soon as Delaney heard Kim's voice, she perked up. Hey, Kimmy. Thug Bunny? How's my favorite crash test dummy? Kim responded warmly. Miss me, don't ya? Delaney teased with a grin. Let's see, the latest 6-week driver course just graduated, and altogether they managed to only roll half the number of cars in their entire course that you did in your first week, Kim replied. Chicken shits, no balls at all, Delaney retorted, her grin widening. That's kind of what Dad said. He said you have a standing job offer when you turn 21, Kim continued. Delaney's grin turned maniacal. Think of all the paperwork you'll get to do. The insurance premiums will sure as hell go up, Kim agreed. She paused briefly. Mackenzie asked if maybe there was a chance for another summer camp next year. Dad and Mom thought it sounded like fun. Driving, but some other stuff too. Maybe 4 weeks if you're interested. Delaney froze for a moment, then turned to me with wide eyes, nodding frantically and silently pleading. I glanced at Cherie, who smiled knowingly. With a single nod to Delaney, she erupted into a loud whoop. Hell yeah, Kim laughed. I figured. We'll let you know when and what to bring. After a few more minutes of casual conversation, Kim finally asked me what I needed. Information on an outfit called Gold Shield Security. We crossed paths with one of their guys, I explained. Crossed paths? Kim echoed. Yeah, he was watching Delaney, I confirmed. You catch him? She inquired. No, the cops did. Had to let him go, I admitted. Kim paused, and I could hear the tapping of keys in the background. Small outfit, not in our league. Usually does VIP security for rap stars and celebs. Typical bigger is better muscle-bound goons, not real talent. Rumor has it they provide extra services. Leg breaking, occasionally murder. Some of their members were implicated in a series of drive-by shootings in that East Coast-West Coast rap feud. No convictions. Let me check contracts. A minute later, Kim began running down a list of contracts they knew about, mostly involving low-level celebrities with minor talents or scandals. Then she mentioned one name. Wait, go back one, I interrupted. Jason Bradley Calloway, Esquire. He does extreme sports. High-altitude mountain boarding, rally racing, base jumping, motocross, ice climbing. Kim listed off. Last I looked, he's a lawyer, I remarked. She tapped away at her keyboard. That too, but he doesn't spend much time at it from what I can see. He's kind of a rising star in extreme sports. Nice work if you can get it. You know where he lives? I asked. Kim hesitated for a moment. Look, I'll send you a standard target package on him, no charge. If he's stalking Delaney, there's a reason, and it's probably not a good one. Cherie raised an eyebrow and mouthed, "Target package?" At me. We'll take it, I confirmed. Standard protocols, send me an email with your PGP key, Kim instructed. Before I could ask what she meant, Delaney jumped in. Can you just use the email and key we set up at summer camp? I've only ever used it to email Tess and Mac anyway. Kim paused. Yes, I still have it. Good idea. I'll send you a test message and the package in a day or two. Delaney straightened up smugly. See, I paid attention. I wish our paying students tried half as hard as you do, Kim remarked genuinely. Delaney suddenly blushed, and Cherie looked at her proudly. Sent, Kim confirmed. Cherie signed Delaney onto the computer. Delaney's experiences with the NCWB had made her cautious about her own vulnerability. She refused to get on the computer unless one of us was present, afraid she might fall into some kind of trap again. She opened her email. Got it. We finished the call, and I glanced at the email. Your email account is encrypted? Delaney shrugged. Katie had us set it up. She said it would make it harder for cyberstalkers to target us. She emphasized how important it is for girls our age to be cautious. Plus, secure communications are always a good idea. Cherie raised an eyebrow at that, clearly indicating she wanted more information about Kurt and Katie's business. It took Delaney a while to wind down enough to go to bed. The idea of another summer camp had her too excited. Eventually, though, she settled in, and Cherie and I sat on the couch watching the fire. I knew Cherie had questions brewing. So, Kurt and Katie's school. She let the sentence hang. They specialize in training bodyguards, VIP asset protection, and manage some private military contracts, I explained. They're involved in security services at a high level. Cherie eyed me skeptically. Sounds like mercenaries. Technically, mercenaries are illegal. The UN banned them in the late 1980s, I replied. Kurt and Katie primarily focus on training. Cherie gave me a thoughtful look and shifted gears. Did Delaney really roll cars down there? It's part of the intensive crash course they run. The only way to truly understand the limits is to push them. They have safety measures and medical teams on standby. She was probably safer there than on a roller coaster, I reassured her, though I knew it was a bold claim. The cars are meant to be tested to their breaking point. If they don't roll them, they're not pushing hard enough. She sat quietly for a moment, processing. That explains why they go through so many cars. Yeah, the training demands it. They simulate extreme situations to prepare students for real-world scenarios, I added. Cherie nodded slowly, absorbing the information. Seems intense? It is, I agreed, grateful for her understanding. As we sat in the quiet of the cabin, the crackling of the fire providing a soothing backdrop, I hoped that Delaney's involvement with Kurt and Katie's world wouldn't bring more unexpected challenges our way. So Delaney rolled a lot of them. She's really fearless, isn't she? Almost too fearless. Cherie smiled softly at me. That's why you did it, so she'd understand when to put the brakes on. I nodded. Everyone has limits. Physics doesn't care if you're afraid or not. I'm hoping she sees it's not just about cars. Besides ... I paused, searching for the right words. Cherie anticipated my thoughts. She attracts trouble? I bet Delaney could be sitting on the couch in her pajamas, eating cookies and watching TV, and somehow it would still end up in a shootout. That's what you're thinking, isn't it? It seems that way. I know it's not her fault. This is all because of Charlotte, but Delaney's neck deep in it, and we don't know how far or deep it goes. Cherie fell silent for a moment. Why do you think they really want to do another summer camp? I think Katie sees it as an investment. Kurt might just be enjoying himself, but Katie is always looking ahead. If they do this every year, by the time the girls are old enough, everything will be second nature to them. Competent female bodyguards are always in demand, especially for high-profile work. Many female principals prefer female bodyguards in certain situations. Even if they recruit just one of the girls when they turn 21, they'll have made their money back in no time. That's... Cherie's voice trailed off. Mercenary? It's sort of what they do. But I know they care about the girls too, so it's not all about money. And Delaney doesn't have to work for them if she doesn't want to. Cherie sighed. It sounds crazy, but it's Delaney. She giggled suddenly. We could go on another vacation, rent another bungalow with a private beach, and I'll buy another teeny-tiny bikini that I can just leave in the suitcase again, maybe. Are you seriously bribing me with promises of sex to convince me to let her go? Cherie looked up at me with a mischievous smile. Are you interested in making a down payment? She then turned her attention to the Target package we'd received from Kim. It had taken only 2 days for Kim to compile the information. He's got a condo in Georgetown, but he's building a mansion up in the mountains in West Virginia, not too far across the border from that hardscrabble place. Bought himself nearly 10,000 acres. Pretty much 2 mountains and a valley between them. He told a reporter he's using the mountain roads to test his cars and motorcycles. An asshole with too much money and too much time on his hands. It's probably worse than that. The mountain he's building on? Cherie scrolled through more information and pulled up a news article. There was a holdout who didn't want to sell. After living there for almost 40 years, she somehow went over the edge of the mountainside road on a clear blue day. A sociopathic asshole with too much money and too much time? Cherie nodded slowly. She has a whole list of coincidental deaths here. Guys he had feuds with, a couple of women who were claiming paternity suits. She looked up at me. Sounds familiar, like Charlotte. One was ruled a suicide, the other was supposedly an accidental overdose. Looks like we've found our guy. She opened a map file that seemed to be overhead imagery, possibly from Google, or knowing Kim, some other source. Here's where he's building his new house. You have to take this long mountainside road to get there. She traced the line of the road. Everything beyond this point is his property. He's gated the roads to keep people out. Is he staying there? Not yet. But Kim included a picture of a Facebook post that says he's up on Saturdays with his guys, practicing racing the mountain roads. It's about a 7-mile loop. She brought up the picture, and we examined it. Big bad Jason Bradley Calloway, Esquire, and a half-dozen muscle-bound guys in black t-shirts. That's probably his security team, more for show than anything else. If Kim is right about Gold Shield, they're for a lot more than that. She said it softly. You need to be careful. I glanced over at Delaney. Careful is our middle name, isn't it? That earned an eye roll and a snicker. I went alone for 2 weeks. Unlike the goon in the SUV, I actually had training in this and had a good half-dozen semi-functional cars to use from the yard. During the week, the salvage yard bustled with work trucks and crews coming and going, but Saturdays were quiet except for Calloway and his bodyguards visiting the mountain retreat. There were occasional random deliveries, but that was about it. Whatever supercar he brought spent the day roaring up and down the mountain roads at breakneck speeds. Calloway struck me as a real adrenaline junkie, pushing the limits on those roads, a risky endeavor bordering on suicidal. Still, he seemed skilled, or at least he believed he was. By the end of the second week, I had a plan, and Delaney had a way to make it better. "Get the keys to the wrecker," I said. Delaney's eyes sparkled with mischief. The wrecker was one of her favorite vehicles, a black Ford F550 equipped with a Vulcan 812 Intruder 2 tow package, ideal for repo work. I didn't use it for repossessions, but it was perfect for extracting wrecks from tight spots. The pivot stinger could slide into seemingly impossible places, and once the tire jaws clamped down, it could effortlessly lift and pull vehicles. I'd bought the wrecker from Emmett Tuckett when he retired. Emmett was a legendary repo man, hardcore, hard-drinking, cigar-smoking, who had seen it all. Shot, stabbed, run over 8 times, and bitten by every breed of dog imaginable, from pit bulls to Rottweilers. He'd retired after a particularly eventful day that involved 2 dead heroin dealers, 4 burned houses, and a classic 1969 Jaguar XKE submerged in a swimming pool with 20 keys of heroin in the trunk. Emmett had walked away with 2 bullets in his chest, a kitchen knife lodged in his shoulder blade, a broken leg from being run over by an orange 1974 Volkswagen thing, and an infected bite from a Pomeranian. Emmett had sold me the wrecker at a bargain price and moved to Florida to babysit his grandchildren, accompanied by his new girlfriend Amelie, whose origins were as mysterious as Emmett's stories. And of course, their Pomeranian named Skittles. "Slowly, work it forward just a bit more," I instructed Delaney, as we prepared for the next phase of our plan. Delaney followed my instructions meticulously, inching the wrecker forward until I signaled for her to stop. She leaned out the window, assessing our work with a furrowed brow. "Will we have enough room to get around it?" "Yeah, we've got a couple feet to spare." I unhooked the canvas straps and tossed them onto the back of the Ford F550. Climbing into the driver's seat, I gestured for Delaney to return to hers. With a firm shove into gear, she maneuvered the vehicle up the winding mountain road. Delaney peered out her window at the sprawling view down the mountainside. "You can see for miles up here." "Maybe that's part of the problem. People like him, living on mountaintops, start to look down on everyone else." She nodded quietly, gazing out until we reached the security gate. The wrecker pushed it open effortlessly, surprisingly quiet for its size. Unlike the gate at the mountain's base, which I had chained shut to deter unwanted visitors, this gate was unlocked. A winding driveway led through the estate, passing by the colossal construction site of what would undoubtedly become a grand mansion. Unfinished fountains, stone pathways, and other structures dotted the landscape. 6 men sat at a stone table, leisurely enjoying drinks and food. They eyed us with mild disinterest, perhaps tinged with disdain. Accustomed to work trucks and deliveries, none of them appeared alarmed by our presence. It seemed unlikely Jason Calloway's security team had ever encountered a repo truck before. "Wow," Delaney whispered, taking in the opulent surroundings. "He must think he's King Louis XIV. "You've been watching that TV series?" "Yeah, it's pretty cool." Delaney scanned the estate, her eyes lighting up as she spotted a distinctive blue car parked prominently amidst the construction. "Ooh, that looks really fragile." "It sure does." My grin mirrored hers as I backed the wrecker toward the car, popping the door open. "Stay inside until I give you the signal. Seriously, if he catches sight of you, he'll know something's up." I dropped to the ground and circled the hypercar, scrutinizing it carefully until one of the men hurried over. "Get away from the car, asshole. Drop off whatever you're here for and leave." "Just following orders from Mr. Calloway to pick this up. Don't want to damage it," I replied calmly. He stared at me, then dashed back to confer with a burly blonde man who exuded a veneer of nonchalance. Moments later, Jason Calloway swaggered over, glaring at me. "Hey, dipshit. I didn't authorize anyone to take my car." "I've got a signed order here," I said, reaching inside my jacket. My hand emerged holding a 1911, pointed squarely at his head. "Tell your friends to clear out to the far side of your property, or things get messy. 3. 2 dots. He hesitated, then motioned to his companion, who hurried off with the others. "What the fuck is this?" "Just insurance so we can chat. You might want to rethink your security detail," I remarked coolly. With a wave of my free hand, Delaney maneuvered the wrecker to the rear of his car, aligning the stinger. Calloway winced as the tow jaws clamped onto his vehicle. "You'll regret this." "Keep quiet unless you want this car worse off," I warned. "We're just here for a conversation." He eyed me skeptically as the car lifted slightly. "What do you want?" "Nothing from you," I replied, gesturing for Delaney to step forward. His gaze froze on her. He clearly recognized her instantly, though his expression betrayed a flicker of disbelief, perhaps hoping we were some elaborate illusion. "Delaney, meet Jason Bradley Calloway, Esquire," I introduced, glancing at Delaney, who pointedly ignored him. "What does Esquire mean, anyway?" "I'm not sure. Remind me, and we'll look it up later. I think it's probably Latin or Greek for asshole. Every Esquire I've ever met has been one. Or they've been lawyers, which is kind of the same thing most times," I replied with a shrug. Calloway started to retort, but Delaney cut in. "That figures. Is this what I think it is? A Bugatti Chiron. They're something like $2 or $3 million apiece. Tops out at over 260 miles per hour, I explained. "It looks like a spaceship from some cheesy afternoon sci-fi movie," Delaney remarked. "Shit, I thought it looked cool until you said that." "Now I want to paint Mars Needs Women on the side," I joked. Delaney nodded. "Do you think he's compensating for something? Jesus Christ, it's a $3 million, 260-mile-an-hour supercar. He must be fucking microscopic." I chuckled and glanced at Calloway. "She's got a point." Delaney walked around the car, tapping it with a screwdriver, making Calloway wince with each sharp sound. "What's this made of?" "Carbon fiber. Makes it hard to damage. It's supposed to have an incredible stiffness rating," he replied tensely. "See? Compensating," Delaney teased, followed by an exaggerated Shrek imitation that earned a snicker from me. She then moved to the back of the truck, pulled a safety chain, and began dragging it under the car. "What the fuck are you doing?" Calloway's anger was starting to override his fear. "What a coincidence. That's the same fucking question we have for you. Why are your bodyguards trying to kill Delaney?" I demanded. He paused, weighing his options. Delaney's indifference to his prized car clearly stung, pushing his arrogance to the forefront. "I'm not going to have some fucking retard getting any of the family money. It's mine, and I plan to keep it that way. She's a mistake. I'm not dealing with a fucking paternity suit." "I'm not interested in your fucking money, shithead," Delaney snapped, her voice sharp as she worked under the rear of the car. With a resounding clank, she secured the hook into place on something that made Calloway wince again. Rolling out from under the car, she grabbed the external lift control. "I don't want anything to do with you or your money. You aren't shit to me. Needles is my dad." She shot me a soft glance before turning her glare back on Calloway, punching the lift button until the back of the car rose higher, causing an odd grating sound as the chin spoiler scraped against the gravel. "Asshole." Startled by the sound, Calloway eyed her warily, but stayed put, mindful of the gun in my hand. Waving him back, I laid out the terms. "Here's the fucking deal. We'll drop your fucking rocket ship at the gate. You stay absolutely still until we do, or it goes on a goddamn sleigh ride behind the wrecker. She just snapped on a safety chain, but she didn't secure the wheel straps. It'd be like a beer can behind a honeymoon car. Delaney inspected the car thoughtfully. We really shouldn't be towing this backwards. It's bad for it, right? It's all-wheel drive. There's no good way to tow it without pulling it up on a rollback. If there's any damage, the asshole here can pay for it out of his fucking trust fund, or whatever. He looked like he wanted to protest, but I cut him off. Shut it. Stein is dead, so don't expect any more help from him. And don't try to kill Charlotte again. I don't need the hassle of everyone assuming I did it. Delaney tilted her head at me. You have kinda earned that, though. She turned to Calloway. Really, he'd be my first suspect. He's got some serious anger issues when it comes to her. I sighed. Fair enough. But I don't want to be fucking blamed if I didn't get to pull the trigger. Confused and uneasy, Calloway glanced between us, but I wasn't in the mood to explain further. Delaney climbed back into the cab, shooting him a final glare. I fixed him with a stern look. This is the only warning you get. Leave us the fuck alone. You come after us now or 10 years from now, you're done. If you come tearing down this mountain after us before I call you on your cell phone, you will die. You got it? He gave a half-assed nod, his eyes glittering with hate. I clenched my teeth. The only reason I'm warning you is because I'm trying to set a better example for the kid. Delaney leaned out the window, rolled her eyes, and let out a snort of laughter. Calloway's face flushed red with rage. Well, fuck. I tried. As we started to pull away, I heard the locked tires chirping as they stuttered across the pavement. Calloway began to move, but I revved the engine and gave his precious car a good jolt. Delaney flipped him the bird out her window, freezing him in his tracks as we reached the gate. She hopped out and ran back to unhook the chain. She climbed back in and looked at me. Done. You ready for this? She nodded firmly. I know his kind. They hovered around Mother and Chuck all the time. They think they're the only ones who matter. It's him or me. I revved the engine again and hit the emergency release on the tire jaws, dropping the 2-ton car to the ground. I could see Calloway and his posse sprinting for a black SUV at the other end of the compound as I ran through the gears. We needed to reach our goal before they caught up. It took longer than I anticipated, and I started to wonder if we'd underestimated him when I heard the burbling roar of the supercar. He had taken the time to get into his car and now took the lead. He must have activated the launch button, a questionable choice for the winding mountain road. But he had to be furious after we had humiliated him in front of his paid sycophants. Nevertheless, the car's handling was top-notch, even at high speeds on straight stretches. I had no idea what he planned to do when he caught up to us. His 2-ton car couldn't easily force the wrecker off the road. But he might have had a plan, and I had no intention of finding out what it was. As I began to slide around the boulder we had pulled into the road, I reached for the big yellow smiley face button on the dash. Emmett Tuckett hadn't just been a repo man. He'd been an ardent hater of what he always called tree huggers and hippies. He'd modified his truck to roll coal, injecting extra diesel fuel to create massive clouds of dense black smoke whenever he passed a Prius or anything else he deemed a target. I'd never quite gotten around to removing it, even though it was technically illegal. Delaney's hand slammed down on the button before I could reach it. I glanced at her. Her face was set, her jaw clenched, and she held the button down with grim, white-knuckle finality. Fuck him! Dark smoke billowed out of the stacks, trailing back up the road behind us as the growl of the Bugatti grew louder. The pitch-black flume crept up the road, pushed by the slightest mountain breeze. Delaney looked steadily down the road, counting under her breath. 3, 2. The clash of the collision behind us was odd, tremendously loud, but lacking the metallic clamor of a normal crash. The Chiron spun past us, flying through the air like a massive blue frisbee. We both watched as it tumbled out over the valley. Delaney blinked once. Wow, that held together better than I thought it would. I slowed, and we watched it until it slammed into the boulder-strewn valley floor 800 feet below. Yeah, I'm sure that will buff right the fuck out. Delaney blinked again and glanced into the mirror on her side. Do you think his bodyguards will see? She was cut off by the clamor of a second crash. The black SUV, far slower and less aerodynamic, tumbled down the mountainside, breaking apart like one of those weird, self-destructive sculptures. Nope. We drove another 30 minutes in silence, Delaney staring straight ahead. You okay? Delaney nodded once, taking a deep breath. Him or me? I've been lucky, real lucky. You've been there for me, but someday it'll be just me. She choked a little, her eyes welling with tears, but she fought it down. I could pretend, but I think maybe this is just the way my life is going to be. Delaney managed a wan smile. You know that, don't you? That's why you sent me down to Texas. There was no point in lying about it. I think it will be this way for a while at least. She nodded slowly. Yeah, I saw his face when you told him to stop trying to kill Mother. He had no clue. And when I mentioned Stein, he didn't know what I was talking about either. Delaney let out a long breath. Shit. Cherie sighed as we finished recounting our tale. So there's more? I nodded. I'm pretty sure Junior wasn't involved in the attack on Charlotte. Tara leaned back. I had Delaney call her to meet us at the cabin. She looked thoughtful. Burns is gay, so he's out. Franks has been the subject of 12 paternity suits in the last 18 years. He's in one now. He'd sleep with a crocodile if it held still long enough. I rolled my eyes. Yeah, he slept with Charlie. A crocodile would be a step up. Tara tried to give me a sour look, but she was pretty used to my attitude about Charlotte at this point. So did you. Delaney snickered. Behave, Les, Cherie scolded with a half-hearted glare, but her smile betrayed her amusement. I'm reformed. I traded up. Delaney nodded in agreement, and even Tara had to shrug. Cherie's smile widened further. Tara shook her head in amusement and continued. Either way, this is nothing new for Franks. He'd just add it to the stack. He probably paid up because he did the math and decided it wasn't worth arguing about. Whatever you think of Charlotte, she thought it through and kept the money low enough to make it easier to pay than argue. I guess we know why Calloway went after Delaney, but honestly, to these guys, this is barely pocket change. It isn't Sharpton, Cherie interjected, leaning forward. He's on the same high-end health insurance program as everyone in the firm. What does that mean? Tara asked, voicing the same question on my mind. I asked around with some of my friends, a lot of whom are nurses, Cherie said with a fond smile. Sharpton had a vasectomy after his fourth son was born, a long time ago. Tara sifted through a stack of paperwork and extracted a page. Nice to know everyone is following the HIPAA Act. Still, that's probably why he never paid. He knows Delaney can't be his. That's all of them then. Calloway, Franks, and Sharpton, I said, trying not to sound as irritated as I felt. Tara nodded, scanning over her papers. There were a number of others, but none with enough influence on the judge. Except... Cherie looked up suddenly. There's another Calloway. Why would he even be involved? He can't be her father. Even Charlotte said that. She didn't even ask him for money. I don't know. But he's the only one left, right? Delaney sighed in frustration. Why is anyone doing this? Nobody actually knows anything. Junior tried to kill me just because there was a chance I might get some of his money, but he didn't really know anything. You said Calloway Jr. owned that whole mountain and the valley? Do you think anyone knows about the wreck? Cherie stared out the window thoughtfully. We can check. Why? I asked. Because Delaney's right. Nobody really knows a shit. I think it's about time we fixed that. Here it is. It's a rush job, but it's accurate. Jasmine handed the package to Cherie, who then slid it over to Tara without breaking her gaze from her friend. I owe you one. The serious-looking nurse shook her head. We both know who owes who, Cherie. I'll never be able to really pay you back. Cherie looked down at the table. You don't owe me anything, Sarah. I just tried to do the right thing. There was a tense, silent exchange between them, something laden with unspoken history. Delaney glanced at me, seeking an explanation. I shook my head subtly. While Cherie and I didn't keep secrets from each other, this seemed personal and not mine to know unless Cherie chose to share it. Tara seemed oblivious to the tension as she reviewed the papers. Couldn't use it in court, but we don't need it to. I'm going to Tiffany's, and we're going to have a serious talk with Mother about this. She's staying with Tiffany until she can get around on her own. Probably won't be very long. Tiffany isn't exactly thrilled with her. Can you give me a day or two? Junior is dead. Stein and his men are dead. We probably have a few days. I've reinforced the wrecker with 1-inch boilerplate inside the doors, seatbacks, and floorboards, just in case anyone tries to get clever. We had gathered what we needed from the crash site without detection by any bystanders or law enforcement. The Chiron had surprisingly held its frame intact, but Calloway hadn't fared nearly as well. I had pieced together his plan from the wreckage. A bright, shiny Steyr AUG submachine gun with 2 full magazines of black-tipped M995 armor-piercing rounds. His intent wasn't to run us off the road, but to shred us with bullets. More AUGs were found amidst the wreckage of the SUV, all brand new and, I suspected, acquired specifically for the purpose of eliminating Delaney. Quietly, we left the scene, confident that it was well hidden from passing eyes on the road, giving us time to regroup. Exiting the brass and teak elevator, we strode past the efficient secretary and into the opulent office without pause. She protested and followed us in, maintaining her professionalism amid the intrusion. The room was vast, lined with leather-bound law books and dominated by a massive teak desk. The man seated behind it waved off his visibly flustered secretary. Everything is all right, Maureen. I've been expecting them. Please close the door and ensure we're not disturbed, he instructed calmly. The elderly man regarded me with a hint of grim amusement. Good afternoon, Mr. Dawes. I did warn Mr. Stein and his partner not to underestimate you. They never quite grasped it, though. Too many movies, thinking special forces is only about physical toughness. I nodded in acknowledgement. There's more to it than that. But that's not what truly counts, is it? It's willpower, yes, but adaptability and intelligence make the real difference in the selection process, he continued, his tone measured and authoritative. Delaney, growing impatient, interrupted sharply. Why the hell are you trying to kill me? He regarded her with a disapproving look, clearly unimpressed with her rudeness and choice of language despite his attempted murder. Darwin, Miss Dawes. Darwin. I would expect Mr. Dawes to understand. It's about natural selection, survival of the fittest. I cannot have you dragging my son into a dramatic court battle over paternity, whether you are his unintended offspring or not. He is capable, intelligent, and I have ambitious plans for him. You, on the other hand, are not worthy of my name. I never wanted your name, asshole. I never wanted anything from you. I didn't even know you existed until now, Delaney retorted sharply. That is irrelevant, Miss Dawes. The potential implications were there. It would become tabloid fodder. It would undermine what I have built here and the future I envision for Jason, he responded coolly. A smirk tugged at the corner of Delaney's mouth. I chuckled softly, and she shook her head, struggling to contain her laughter. So it was all for nothing, she remarked. He looked at us quizzically until I pulled out a sheaf of papers from my back pocket and tossed them onto his desk. What is this? He inquired, picking up the papers. A DNA test. You can buy the kits at any corner drugstore these days. We had to conduct this one in a rather unconventional manner, I explained, recalling the grisly task of collecting samples from the wreckage of Jason Bradley Calloway's car. And, he prompted, clearly uneasy. Delaney rolled her eyes. Even I can understand that test. It says I'm not related to Junior, which means I can't be related to you, she stated emphatically. Thank God for that. That would be awful. She paused suddenly. This is like that Bird movie. Bird movie? I was utterly lost. Yeah, Delaney nodded. The one with the trench coat guy, the creepy guy, and that old fat guy. The Maltese Falcon? I hazarded a guess. She squinted thoughtfully. That sounds right. I'm like that bird statue everyone was after. All that chaos, people dying, and nobody bothered to check if it was real. Clearly irritated, the old man scrutinized the papers more closely. If this is accurate, then I have no further interest in you, he declared, reclining back in his chair, believing the matter settled. Glancing at Delaney, I raised an eyebrow. Do you think we should tell him? Absolutely. I want to see his face, Delaney replied with a mischievous grin. I fixed my gaze on the old man. You haven't heard from your son in a few days, have you? That's not unusual, he replied stiffly. He travels extensively for his racing and other pursuits. Junior won't be continuing your legacy or anything else. He appears to have had a fatal accident, I stated bluntly, watching his face darken with sudden concern. Before he could react, I continued. It seems his concern over Delaney's potential revolved more around whether she'd inherit your money than your legacy. Delaney figured out it was either him or her, and it didn't end well for him. Darwin, you understand. Survival of the fittest. He scrutinized Delaney for a moment, and the bitter pride in her expression confirmed my words. Shock etched his suddenly aged face. He began, but couldn't finish. You're free to send others after us, of course. Hire better people, make it interesting, I challenged. But we'll be ready, and I assure you, they won't survive it next time. I will dismantle everything you've built. Retrieving a thumb drive from my pocket, I tossed it onto his desk. You might want to look at that before making any decisions. Signed affidavits and videos regarding the behavior of your firm's men. Tara wasn't pleased with the plans you assholes made for her. Charlotte had been reluctant, but Tara and Tiffany had been relentless. With her assistance and access to her thumb drives, they had identified 4 more women and 2 young men, persuading them to collaborate with us for protection. One of the men had managed to capture footage from one of the parties. The shock drained the color from Calloway's face, but he rallied swiftly. That would be child's play to defeat in court. I chuckled wryly. Probably. I'm not a lawyer, but you're likely right. However, it won't be in court. It'll be public. You'd be the punchline of late-night talk shows. Your firm, your reputation, would be tarnished irreparably. You'd become a laughingstock, a sad, dirty joke. He regarded me grimly, knowing I had pinpointed his vulnerability. I grinned at her mischievously. It's a future threat, keeps you on your toes. Delaney rolled her eyes but smirked. Yeah. As we approached Sally, I could see Delaney was still somber. I leaned closer. Seriously though, what's on your mind? She sighed, kicking a stone on the path. Just thinking about all of this, the mess with Calloway, the whole paternity thing, it's a lot. Yeah, it is, I agreed quietly. But you handled it like a champ. She glanced up at me, a mix of appreciation and exhaustion in her eyes. Thanks. But it's a lot to process, you know? Everything's so complicated. Complicated is an understatement, I said, resting a hand on her shoulder. But you've got a knack for handling the unexpected. Delaney nodded slowly, considering my words. Yeah, I guess. It's just hard sometimes. I get it, I assured her. But you've got people who've got your back, no matter what. She managed a small smile. I know. Thanks, Les. Anytime, kid, I replied, giving her shoulder a squeeze before we reached Sally. Now, about that movie night, what are we watching? Delaney brightened a bit. Definitely The Maltese Falcon. Classic Bogart. I chuckled. Sounds perfect. Let's get back and enjoy it. With that, we climbed into Sally, ready to head back, leaving the shadows of the past behind us, at least for the moment. Just keep leaving that power sander out on the bench instead of putting it back, Thug Bunny. See what happens. 3 weeks later, we found Sheriff Hyatt sitting on the stairs to his office as we pulled into town. His expression was a mix of weariness and curiosity. "You guys seem awful relaxed all of a sudden," he remarked, folding his arms. "By an odd coincidence," I began casually. "There was a report about a carload of Gold Shield security boys and their employer taking a tumble off a cliff in West Virginia. Sounds like it happened a few weeks back." "Good to hear." Sheriff Hyatt nodded slowly. "Sounds like they should have been more careful." Delaney chimed in, popping open the toolbox on the rollback. "They weren't exactly our friends, Sheriff. They were all doing their own thing." He sighed heavily. "Jesus, you two sure know how to attract trouble." Delaney looked indignant. "That whole Mookie incident wasn't our doing." "Yet, you still managed to step in it," Hyatt replied, shaking his head. "Which leads me to why I'm here. We had a visit from a couple of corporate types, claiming to be from a big European pharmaceutical company. Germans, I think. They were pushing hard to inspect that wrecked car of yours." "Hackman Pharmaceuticals?" I suggested. "Yeah, that's the one," Hyatt confirmed. "They weren't too friendly about it. State Department breathing down our necks to cooperate, but I gave them a runaround. Told them there was nothing left of interest after it caught fire, except maybe some burned-up weed I mentioned in the report." Delaney raised an eyebrow. "And they bought that?" "They seemed more relieved it wasn't something worse," Hyatt shrugged. "None of this makes sense, though. 2 dead, you got Hyatt on medical leave for months, all over some pot." I shrugged in agreement. "Doesn't make sense to me either." He nodded, starting to head back towards his Tahoe. "I'll get your guns back to you in a couple of days. Oh, and the coroner's report on those two? Vague enough that it could almost sound like Hyatt did the deed. Be careful, I don't need pharmaceutical bigwigs sniffing around my town looking for answers." With that, he climbed into his SUV and drove off, leaving us to contemplate the bizarre turn of events and the lingering mysteries surrounding Hackman Pharmaceuticals and their sudden interest in a wrecked Bugatti. I appreciate it. Hyatt deserves some kind of commendation. She chased them after they hit her, and she still tried to take them down. He nodded solemnly. I was kind of thinking that. He climbed into his Tahoe. "You two stay out of trouble." Delaney watched him pull out of the yard, then turned to the toolbox and let out a disappointed sigh. "Ugh, dried mouse shit." "Serves you right. You left the tacos in there. You clean it up." "Blech." Delaney wrinkled her nose in disgust and started to reach in with the whisk broom. "Huh, look at that." I peered over her shoulder and we stood there silently for a moment. "You know, it is Tuesday." She looked up at me with a mischievous grin. 12 amazing tacos." Mookie glanced up from the register as we entered. His hair had been cropped short and bruises marked his face, healing slowly. He paled further and stiffened. "Welcome to Taco Grande. May I take your order?" I studied him quietly for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, we'll take a big taco sampler and 2 large Cokes." "Yes, sir." He keyed in the order. "That will be $11.92, please." I handed him $12 and watched as he carefully counted out our change, handing it back with the receipt. He turned slowly, laboring from his injuries, and packed 12 tacos into a bag, sliding it across the counter with 2 cups. "Will that be all, sir?" I exchanged a glance with Delaney, then spoke up. "Number 1 more thing." Delaney pushed an envelope toward him. "It's all we could find. This spilled out in the toolbox after the mice got to it." He looked at the envelope in disbelief, and I continued where Delaney left off. "It's not much, just about half an ounce of seeds. You won't be getting rich off of it anytime soon, but it's something." His lower lip trembled slightly. "They burned my place. Everything. You saw it. Delaney nudged me, and I sighed. I've got a used trailer for sale. I'll drop it off where your old one was next Saturday. Mookie stared at us, speechless for a moment, before managing a small nod. Thank you. We collected our food and drinks and left Taco Grande, leaving Mookie to contemplate the unexpected generosity. As we drove away, I couldn't help but think that perhaps, for once, we were leaving something better in our wake. I don't have any money. I held up the change in my hand. This looks like enough. He stared at me in disbelief. It's probably all bullshit, you know. There's no way it cures cancer. I doubt if it's any different than any of the other shit people are smoking. But somebody was willing to kill over it, so, just in case, I'd like to think somebody out there besides Hackman Pharmaceuticals was growing some. Just make sure you give away some of the seed, get it out there. He nodded slowly, uncertainly, as we picked up our bag and walked out. Delaney glanced back at Mookie through the window. You really think he'll do anything with it? I think so. Hell, he may be the best choice. He doesn't really want to be rich or powerful. He just wants to grow some good weed. He'll grow it and give a bunch out. Anybody else would try to get rich selling it to a big company. She wrinkled her nose. Kinda hard to picture him as a hero. I chuckled. Imagine his statue in front of the CDC. Mookie, hero, and healer. I hope they have the Taco Grande hat on the statue. I can't fucking imagine it without. Delaney snickered. You owe $1. Damn it.